I'm Jack, 41, and if you'd told me a year ago that my own family would treat me like a walking ATM, I would have laughed it off. But life has a way of showing you exactly who people are once there's money involved. I grew up in a middle-class family. Mom worked as a nurse, Dad was a mechanic, and we never had much, but we had enough. I was the quiet kid, the one who saved up his allowance, fixed old electronics for fun, and learned early that being careful with money wasn't stinginess. It was survival. My younger brother, Adam, was the opposite. He was the dreamer, the idea guy, the one who could charm anyone out of their wallet but never held a job longer than a summer. My parents called him our little genius. Me? I was the responsible one, which, in family code, meant the one who'll bail everyone out. When I was in my late 20s, I moved out, worked my way up in IT, and eventually started a small remote consulting business. It wasn't flashy, but it paid well, and for the first time, I could breathe. Over the years, I saved every extra cent I could. By 40, I had a solid cushion, nothing life-changing, but enough to feel secure. My parents knew I did tech stuff. Adam knew I was comfortable, but none of them knew the exact numbers, and I kept it that way for a reason. Then came the phone call that started everything. It was a Sunday morning. I was having coffee on my balcony, half listening to a podcast when my phone lit up. Adam. I hadn't heard from him in months. I picked up, expecting maybe a casual "what's up?" Instead, he jumped straight into a pitch like some over-caffeinated salesman. "Jack, bro, I finally figured it out. This is it. The big one." I sighed. "The big one. You said that about the food truck. And the crypto thing. And the—" No, he interrupted. "This is different. I've been talking with this guy from LA. He's got connections. We're launching a luxury energy drink. All natural, zero sugar, premium packaging, marketed for athletes. It's going to blow up." I waited. "Okay, and I just need some startup capital. Small stuff, bro, 50 grand, maybe 60 tops. You'll double it in 6 months, easy." I nearly choked on my coffee. $60,000? Adam, that's not small stuff. That's someone's annual salary. Not yours, he said, laughing. "Come on, man, you've been doing that computer thing for years. I know you're loaded." That line hit me like a spark to dry grass. Loaded. As if the years of working weekends, fixing code at 2 a.m., and turning down vacations somehow didn't count. As if money just appeared in my account because I was lucky. "Adam," I said carefully, "I'm not investing in another one of your ideas. You still owe Dad for that restaurant thing." "That wasn't my fault," he shot back. "The city shut it down, remember? They had zoning issues." "You didn't read the permit," I reminded him. "You opened a grill in a space zoned for retail." He groaned, exasperated, as if I was the unreasonable one. "You always got to bring up the past, huh? This is different. I have a plan. I just need someone who believes in me." "Belief doesn't pay suppliers," I said. "Sorry, man. I'm out." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, and then his tone changed, flat, cold. "Wow. Guess family doesn't mean much to you anymore." I didn't answer. He hung up. For a few days, I didn't think much of it. Then my mom called. "Jack, honey," she began sweetly, too sweetly. "I heard you talk to Adam." "Yeah, briefly." "Well," she sighed, "he's really putting his heart into this business. You know how much potential he has if people would just give him a chance." I rubbed my forehead. "Mom, he's had a dozen chances. This time is different," she insisted. "He's growing up. You could help him get started, and it would mean so much to your father and me." "Mom, I'm not giving him 50 grand. Her voice sharpened. "Why not? You're single, you don't have kids, you can afford it. We've always supported you." I almost laughed. Supported me? I paid for my own college textbooks, my own rent, my own car. When my laptop broke senior year, I sold my bike to buy a used one. Support wasn't exactly their strong suit. "I'm sorry," I said finally, "but no." She went quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "Don't come crying to us when you need help someday." Click. That was the first time my mom ever hung up on me. Over the next week, the calls came in waves. My dad tried the guilt route. "You know your brother's had a tough run, Jack. This could change his life." My aunt texted, "He's your family. Money comes and goes, but blood doesn't." Even my cousin chimed in with, "Bro, 60K is nothing for a successful guy like you." I started ignoring them. Then the messages turned nasty. Adam posted some vague nonsense on Facebook. Some people act rich, but forget who helped them get there. Mom commented a heart emoji. My uncle liked it. I wanted to respond, but I didn't. I've learned that silence burns louder than words sometimes. 2 days later, my dad called again, this time sounding urgent. Jack, your brother's at the bank right now. He says you agreed to co-sign his loan. They just need your confirmation. What? I nearly dropped my phone. No, I didn't. Well, Dad said slowly, he told us you did. You should just help him out, son. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. My heart was pounding. Co-signing a loan without my consent? That wasn't just irresponsible, it was fraud. I called the bank myself and told them in no uncertain terms, do not approve anything in my name. That evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger, just clarity. I'd spent years trying to be the good son, the dependable one who never caused trouble. But now, it was like the mask had fallen off. They didn't see me as family anymore. They saw me as a resource. The next morning, I checked my accounts, transferred everything to a separate bank, one they didn't know about. Then I booked a flight. One way. I didn't even care where, just somewhere far. I ended up choosing Portugal. I'd never been, but I'd seen photos of the coast, golden cliffs, blue water. Peaceful. As I packed my suitcase, my phone buzzed again. Mom. Then Adam. Then Dad. I turned it face down and zipped the bag. By the time I landed 12 hours later, my inbox was overflowing. Calls, texts, voicemails. I ignored them all. That night, I sat at a small restaurant overlooking the Atlantic, sipping wine and eating grilled fish while the sun melted into the sea. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. And then, just as dessert arrived, my phone lit up with a message that made my stomach drop. It was from Mom. Co-sign his loan or don't bother coming home. I just stared at it, the glow of the screen reflecting in the wine glass. Outside, the waves kept rolling in, steady and endless. Something in me hardened. By midnight, I'd moved every dollar I had, savings, stocks, emergency fund, completely out of reach. My phone buzzed nonstop. 63 missed calls. A new family group chat labeled Family Emergency. That's when I knew they weren't going to stop. They weren't just asking anymore. They were planning something. And I had no idea just how far they'd go next. The next morning, I woke up to a dozen more messages, all variations of the same theme: guilt, manipulation, and a strange, simmering rage hiding under polite phrasing. We just want to talk. You're breaking your mother's heart. You can't just disappear, Jack. And then, from Adam, you'll regret this when I'm rich and you're begging for help. I sat on the balcony of my Airbnb, the ocean whispering against the cliffs below, and realized just how much peace cost me and how cheap they thought it was. I hadn't even been gone 24 hours, and already, the emotional warfare had begun. I didn't reply. I didn't block them either. I just let the notifications pile up, a digital storm that I refused to step into. But silence, in my family, was never neutral. It was provocation. 2 days later, I got an email, not from any of them, but from my landlord back home in Seattle. Hi, Jack. Sorry to bother you, but your brother stopped by the property asking for a copy of your lease and mentioned he was handling your affairs while you were abroad. I didn't give him anything, of course, but I thought you should know. I nearly laughed. Handling my affairs? Adam couldn't handle a calendar reminder, let alone someone else's finances. But it also told me something critical. They weren't just angry. They were plotting. That afternoon, I called a friend of mine, Ethan, a lawyer who'd helped me draft my business contracts years ago. Hypothetically, I said, if a family member tried to impersonate me to access financial or legal information, what could I do? He chuckled. That's not hypothetical, is it? Nope. Keep a paper trail, he said. Save every message, every email. If anyone tries to forge your signature or use your personal data, it's fraud. You're protected. But, Jack, are you sure this is just your brother? Meaning someone's enabling him. Probably your parents. He wasn't wrong. The next few weeks turned into a bizarre routine. I'd wake up in Lisbon, make coffee, go for a walk, and check my phone only once a day, usually to find a new angle of attack waiting for me. One day it was pity. Adam's under so much stress. He just needs someone to believe in him. The next, accusation. You're selfish. You left us to deal with everything. Then guilt. Your father's blood pressure's been through the roof since you left. Hope you're happy. Every time, I closed the messages and stared out at the sea, trying to decide whether I should feel anger or grief. Both hurt the same. But then, things took a darker turn. One morning, I logged into my old bank account, mostly out of curiosity, to find a $5 withdrawal. Not from me. It was small enough not to trigger alerts, but big enough to show someone had access. I called the bank immediately. "Mr. Carter," the representative said, "it looks like someone logged in from a device registered under your old home IP address. Do you share access?" "No. I live alone." They froze the account immediately, but that $5 transaction told me everything I needed to know. Adam or my parents had my old login info, and they were testing the waters. The next day, Mom called again, voice trembling with performative hurt. "Jack, why are you doing this? We're your family." "Mom," I said quietly, "did you or Dad log into my account?" Silence. Then a breath. "Your father just wanted to check that you were okay financially. You didn't answer our calls. We were worried." "By stealing my password?" "Don't use that tone with me," she snapped suddenly. "You've been acting like we're strangers. You ran off like a criminal. We raised you better than this." "I didn't run off," I said. "I left." Same thing. When I didn't respond, she sighed dramatically. "Fine. If you want to abandon your family, go ahead. Just remember who took care of you when you had nothing." That line hit differently now. It wasn't love, it was leverage. Every act of kindness they'd ever given came with an invisible debt, and I was done paying interest on it. The following week, I got a call from a mutual friend back home, Sarah, who'd gone to school with Adam. She sounded hesitant. "Jack, this is awkward, but did you really promise to invest in Adam's business and then ghost him?" I closed my eyes. "He told you that?" "He told everyone that," she said. "He said you bailed on him at the last minute, and now he's drowning because of you. He even showed people fake text messages where it looks like you agreed to wire him money." I felt my jaw tighten. "He forged texts." "Looks like it," she said softly. "He's saying you ruined his life." For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything. The betrayal stung, not because it was surprising, but because it was familiar. Every family dinner, every holiday, every time Adam messed up, there was always someone else to blame, and someone else to clean up the mess. Usually me. By the time I opened social media that night, the rumors had spread. Mutual friends had commented under Adam's posts, some sympathetic, some passive-aggressive. "Wow, can't believe your own brother would do that. Family's supposed to have your back." I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. But inside, a storm was building. A few days later, Mom called again, this time with a tone I hadn't heard before. Soft, fragile, almost apologetic. "Jack, honey, Adam's in trouble." I said nothing. He took out a short-term loan. The business deal fell through, and now the collectors are calling. He's really struggling. They might seize his car. "His car?" I asked dryly. "You mean the one he bought with my old laptop money?" She ignored the jab. "He's desperate, Jack. Please, if you could just help with this one last thing." "Stop," I said quietly. "Excuse me. Stop asking. Stop pretending it's just a favor. You're asking me to clean up his mess again. I'm done." "Don't speak to me that way," she snapped. "We're a family. We help each other." "You don't help me," I said. "You use me." Her breath caught. Then, with venom, "You've changed." I finally grew up. She hung up again. That night, I sat in my room listening to the rain tap against the window and realized something chilling. I didn't miss them. Not the noise, not the guilt, not even the pretense of family unity. What I missed was the idea of family. The illusion that if I worked hard enough, they'd treat me fairly. A week later, a letter arrived at my Lisbon apartment. No return address, but postmarked from Washington State. Inside was a single page, typed neatly. "Jack, this is your last chance to do the right thing. Adam's loan is in collections, and your name is being dragged through the mud. You can fix this before it gets worse. Family always comes first." No signature, just that chilling sentence. I didn't sleep that night. My brain wouldn't stop spinning. How far would they go? Identity theft? Lies? Public humiliation? I'd spent most of my life avoiding confrontation, but now I realized they counted on that. My silence was their permission. The next day, I decided to check Adam's social media again. His profile picture had changed, him standing next to a rented sports car, wearing sunglasses, captioned, "Don't worry, the empire's still rising. Some people can't stop greatness." Hundreds of likes. Comments cheering him on. And buried near the bottom, one comment from my mom. Proud of you, son. Keep pushing forward. That one hurt more than all the others combined. I knew then that whatever came next wouldn't just be a misunderstanding. It would be war. But before I could even think of a response, my phone rang again. It wasn't Mom this time. It wasn't Adam. It was my bank manager. Mr. Carter, he said cautiously, we received a request this morning to verify your identity for a new joint account application under your name and your brother's. Did you authorize that? My heart stopped. No, I said slowly. I did not. The manager hesitated. We flagged it as suspicious, but it had your personal information. Full address, social security number, signature. My pulse thudded in my ears. My signature? Yes, sir. An exact match. I sat there, frozen, the sound of ocean waves crashing faintly through the open window. They hadn't just tried to guilt me. They were trying to be me. And as I hung up, realization hit me like ice in my chest. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. And they were about to learn what happens when the responsible one finally stops playing nice. I didn't answer the next few calls from the bank. My hands were trembling too badly to even hold the phone straight. For most of my life, I thought betrayal was an emotional thing, something that hurt because it came from people you loved. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't just betrayal. It was an ambush, planned, deliberate, and terrifyingly real. That night, I sat by the window in my Lisbon apartment, staring out at the ocean. The waves rolled in, steady and uncaring, and I tried to steady my breathing the same way. Somewhere across the Atlantic, my family, the people who raised me, were trying to steal my identity. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life crumble in slow motion. The next morning, I called the bank manager back. Can you send me everything related to that joint account request? I asked. He hesitated. Mr. Carter, are you planning to take legal action? I just need to see it. An hour later, the email came through. The PDF attachment opened with a single click. And there it was, my name, my address, my birth date, all filled out neatly. The signature at the bottom looked identical to mine. But it wasn't. What froze me wasn't just the signature. It was the handwriting above it, in blue ink scanned onto the document. A note written in the margins. Jack approved over the phone. I'll bring the signed copy later. Mom will verify. Mom. I read it 3 times before it sank in. Not only had Adam forged my signature, my mother vouched for it. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen, but at some point, the shock gave way to something colder. I wasn't angry in the way I used to be, shouting, venting, pacing around. This was different. This was the kind of anger that sits behind your ribs like a loaded gun, waiting. I forwarded the document to Ethan, my lawyer friend, with a short message. They used my info. Need to talk. He called within minutes. Jack, I looked at the file. This is serious. Whoever submitted this committed fraud, possibly identity theft, depending on the jurisdiction. The handwriting note helps. It shows intent. Can they actually get in trouble for this? I asked quietly. Oh, definitely. But Jack, are you sure you want to go down that road? We're talking about your family. I let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Family? I think that word expired a while ago. Still, I didn't press charges. Not yet. Something in me needed to understand why. Why would my mom, of all people, cross that line? So I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice brittle but composed. Jack, did you tell the bank I approved a joint account with Adam? There was a pause, just long enough to confirm she was about to lie. Of course not, she said smoothly. I don't know what you're talking about. I have the document, I said. Your name's right there. Another pause, longer this time. Then she sighed. Your brother's under so much pressure, Jack. He just needed help getting things in order. You weren't responding, and so you pretended I said yes? Her voice hardened. We didn't pretend. We just did what needed to be done. You're his brother. I couldn't even form words for a few seconds. Mom, that's illegal. She scoffed. You always make everything sound so dramatic. You think I don't know you? You would have helped eventually. You just needed a push. My chest felt hollow. I wanted to yell, but the disbelief swallowed my voice. You forged my name, Mom. We didn't forge anything. We just moved things forward. You're so stubborn sometimes. You don't understand what it's like watching your family fall apart. That line, your family, hit me in a way I didn't expect, as if I wasn't even part of it anymore. I hung up without another word. My hands were shaking again, but this time from something sharper than fear. Betrayal wasn't a surprise now, it was confirmation. Every little doubt I'd had about their intentions, every ignored gut feeling, was real. Over the next few days, I went through the motions like a machine. Closed old accounts, froze my credit, changed every password, added two-factor authentication to everything from my email to my tax records. Ethan guided me through most of it, but even he sounded unsettled. "It's not every day you have to lock yourself out of your own family," he said quietly. Meanwhile, the messages kept coming. From Adam, "You ruined everything." From Mom, "You didn't have to embarrass us like that." From Dad, "This isn't how family solves things, Jack." I ignored all of them until a message from an unknown number popped up one morning. It was a photo. Adam, standing in front of my parents' house, holding up a printed document. My signature, again, forged. Underneath, he'd written, "Guess we'll do it our way then." I stared at it, pulse hammering in my throat. Our way never involved crime. His apparently did. I called Ethan again. "What happens if they keep doing this?" "Then we escalate," he said. "But Jack, they're getting desperate." "That's a good thing. Desperation leads to mistakes." He was right. A few days later, I found one. A notification pinged my email. Password reset requested. I hadn't requested it. The account? My old cloud storage, the one I used years ago to back up my business contracts and invoices. I checked the IP log. Same Washington address. For the first time, I didn't panic. I smiled. Because that storage account wasn't empty. I'd kept everything. Old messages, receipts, scanned checks, even notes from the times I'd helped Adam pay off his past debts. Proof that for years, I'd been the one covering his mistakes. Proof that every loan he begged for never came back. And mixed in those folders? Screenshots, bank statements, and every text my parents had sent about this business idea. Every manipulative word, every guilt trip. I made copies. Lots of them. Still, I wanted to see how far they'd go before I decided what to do. I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed while I was in a cafe. A number I didn't recognize, but local to my hometown. I answered. "Jack Carter," a woman's voice asked. "This is Rachel from Evergreen Financial. We have a few questions regarding your business loan application." My stomach dropped. "Excuse me." "Yes, the application for the startup financing under Carter Innovations. You listed your brother as a co-founder." I nearly dropped my cup. "That's not my company. I never applied for any loan." The woman paused. "Well, your documentation says otherwise. Driver's license, tax ID, even proof of funds, all under your name." I could barely speak. "Send me a copy." When the email came through, I opened it right there in the cafe. My ID, scanned, cropped, and attached to a business proposal filled with buzzwords and fake projections. It even had my digital signature pasted on the last page. They'd done it again. Except this time, they weren't just forging my name. They were using my identity to secure debt. I forwarded it all to Ethan. His reply came within minutes. "Jack, this crosses into felony territory. You need to act now." I sat there for a long time, coffee going cold in front of me. Every part of me wanted to believe there was still a way back, that if I called Mom one more time, or if Adam finally realized how deep he'd gone, something could still be salvaged. But the truth was staring me in the face. They weren't going to stop. That night, I went through my old voicemails. There were dozens I hadn't listened to. Most were noise. But one, from Dad, caught my attention. His voice was low, tired. "Jack, your mother's upset. She said you called her a criminal. You need to apologize. Adam's just trying to make something of himself. You know he looks up to you. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I replayed it 3 times. Not once did he say what they'd done was wrong. Only that my reaction was the problem. That was the moment something inside me shut off. The last bit of hesitation gone. Still, I didn't lash out. I didn't send threats or warnings. I just went quiet. Over the next week, I gathered every piece of evidence I could: digital trails, emails, screenshots, voice messages, forged documents, even metadata timestamps. I backed them up in multiple locations, with passwords and legal notes attached. And while they thought I was sitting quietly overseas, licking my wounds, I was actually preparing something they wouldn't see coming. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning, the final straw arrived. It was a photo sent by my cousin Emily, the only relative who'd quietly stayed in touch with me through the chaos. The picture showed my parents' living room. My mom, Adam, and Dad sitting around a table covered with papers. In the center, a letterhead. My name. My company's logo. The caption from Emily read, "They're planning to sue you for damages. They said you ruined Adam's reputation." I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. My own family was preparing to drag me through the legal system using forged documents and lies. And in that moment, somewhere between heartbreak and disbelief, something inside me changed completely. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was purpose. They wanted war. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight back. I didn't cry when I saw that photo. I just sat there for a long time, staring at my laptop screen while the Atlantic wind rattled the windows. The anger had burned itself out days ago. What was left felt heavier, slower. It was the kind of exhaustion that lives in your bones, that makes you wonder if you've wasted your whole life trying to earn love that was never real to begin with. For the next few days, I barely left the apartment. The world outside went on as usual, tourists laughing in cafes, kids playing soccer in the alley below, but inside, I was unraveling. Every part of me wanted to believe it wasn't real, that this was some sick misunderstanding, that my mom hadn't actually sat there in that living room, plotting with Adam, that my dad, who once taught me how to fix a bike chain in the garage, wasn't silently backing it all. But denial doesn't change facts. The lawsuit papers arrived 3 days later. International courier. Neat envelope, no return address. But I knew the handwriting on the sender's line. Mom's looping, elegant script. Inside were photocopies of evidence. Screenshots, messages, most of them doctored. Fake conversations showing me promising to invest in Adam's company. Fake invoices that made it look like I'd accepted payments and backed out last minute. They were accusing me of breach of trust and defamation, claiming I'd sabotaged Adam's reputation by refusing to fund his business after agreeing in writing. The letter ended with one line that made my stomach twist. "We still love you, but you've left us no choice." That was when I broke. I remember sliding down the wall, the papers spilling around me, and just sitting there until the light outside faded. The smell of salt air mixed with printer ink. I wasn't even angry anymore, just hollow. For the next week, I moved through life like a ghost. Ate when I remembered, slept when my body forced me to. I stopped checking my phone, stopped replying to Ethan, stopped opening emails. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces around that table. Calm, focused, determined. My own mother forging her son's downfall like it was just another family chore. Then one evening, something small snapped me out of it. A knock on my door. My Airbnb host, an older woman named Clara, holding a small dish of food. She spoke Portuguese softly, but I understood enough to catch the gist. She'd noticed I hadn't left the apartment in days. Said I looked tired. "Eat," she said simply, setting the plate on my counter. "And breathe. The sea is for healing, not hiding." It sounds ridiculous, but that moment grounded me more than anything else had in weeks. Someone who didn't owe me a thing had shown more kindness than the people I'd bled for my whole life. That night, I walked down to the cliffs. The wind was cold, the waves rough, but the noise was cleansing. I watched the horizon until the sun sank completely and whispered to no one in particular, "They're not winning." And for the first time, I meant it. The next morning, I got up early, shaved, cleaned the apartment, and opened my laptop. The lawsuit wasn't real yet. It was a threat dressed up in paperwork. But they wanted me rattled, defensive, desperate to fix things. I wasn't going to give them that. Instead, I spent the next several days in quiet research. I contacted Ethan again, this time calm and deliberate. "I need to know exactly what happens if they try to pursue this." He didn't ask if I was okay. I think he could hear the change in my voice. "They won't get far," he said. "They have no legal ground. But if they keep submitting falsified documents, we'll have evidence of perjury and fraud. You could end this for good." I hesitated. Would that mean pressing charges? Yes, against all of them. I didn't answer right away. The thought of seeing their names in a court filing made my chest tighten, but at the same time, something about it felt peaceful, like I was finally putting the pieces where they belonged. Over the following weeks, I started quietly rebuilding my life. I rented a small long-term apartment near the coast. I found a co-working space and slowly eased back into my consulting work, taking small projects just to keep my brain busy. On the surface, it looked like recovery. But beneath it, every night before bed, I was building something else, a meticulous record. a digital map of everything they'd done. I kept files labeled by date, each folder a quiet bullet, each timestamp a nail in their coffin. But while I was collecting evidence, they weren't sitting still either. One morning, I woke up to over 70 missed calls from an unknown number. Then came the texts. Your father's in the hospital. Answer us, please. My hands went cold. For a few minutes, I actually believed it. I called the hospital in Seattle. No record of my father being admitted anywhere. It was another ploy, another test to see if they could still manipulate me with guilt. They couldn't. Not anymore. But still it hurt. The way they knew exactly which buttons to push, the way they could weaponize love like a loaded gun. That night, I walked along the shore until the sand soaked through my shoes. I watched couples laugh over dinner, saw kids chasing waves, and wondered what it would feel like to have a family that didn't view you as an asset, to just exist without being useful. Then, somewhere between the dark water and the smell of salt, I made a quiet promise to myself. This was the last time they'd ever control me with fear. From that point on, I became deliberate with everything I did. I updated all my business records, moved my consulting LLC entirely offshore, and changed my tax residency. I even got a Portuguese lawyer to review local privacy laws. Turns out, my family couldn't legally access anything I owned here without an international court order. Still, the emotional weight didn't just vanish. Some nights, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my chest tight, the ghost of my mother's voice echoing in my head. Family always comes first. I'd stare at the ceiling and think about how twisted that sentence had become, how family meant ownership to them. One night, around that same hour, I finally opened a message from Adam that I'd been ignoring for weeks. It said, "You think you're better than us now? You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for me. I made you cool in high school. I helped you get your first car. You owe me. You've always owed me." I laughed out loud. Not a bitter laugh, just disbelief. Even at rock bottom, he was rewriting history. I typed a reply. Short, calm, final. You're right about one thing. I do owe you. You taught me who not to trust. Then I blocked him. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. It wasn't over, far from it, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't playing defense anymore. They thought they'd broken me. They didn't realize that the quietest people often rebuild in silence. And when they do, they come back sharper than before. And as I closed my laptop and looked out at the sunrise over the Atlantic, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The next time my family heard my name, it wouldn't be as their scapegoat. It would be as the man who took everything they tried to steal and turned it into their undoing. The next few months passed in a strange blur of calm and quiet rebuilding. I never made any grand declarations or revenge speeches. There was no point. I just started living better than I ever had before, quietly, efficiently, and without needing anyone's permission. By April, Lisbon finally started to feel like home. I'd found a rhythm again. Early morning walks to the harbor, strong espresso at the cafe near my apartment, then hours of deep work in a co-working space overlooking the river. I was consulting for 3 different companies by then, 2 in Europe, 1 in Canada, and for the first time in years, I wasn't just comfortable financially. I was thriving. When I wasn't working, I started rediscovering things I used to love. Photography, for one. I'd always had a good eye for light and detail, and now, with time and peace on my side, I carried my camera everywhere. I took photos of the sea at dawn, the cobblestone streets after rain, the quiet faces of fishermen coming in at sunrise. I didn't realize it yet, but those photos would end up being a metaphor for what I was doing with my life, capturing beauty in the aftermath of chaos. But success wasn't just emotional, it was tangible. I'd incorporated a new version of my business overseas, built an entirely new client list, and rebranded under a different name, Carter Digital Systems. It was leaner, smarter, and far more protected. Ethan helped me draft contracts that shielded my assets across jurisdictions, and a local accountant helped me navigate Portuguese tax benefits. By summer, I'd doubled my income from the year before. Still, I didn't tell anyone. Not my family, not even mutual friends back home. I wanted the silence to linger a little longer, to see what they'd do when they thought I'd vanished. Turns out, they didn't handle it well. In late May, Emily, my cousin who had secretly kept me updated, messaged me again. They're saying you're broke, that you had a breakdown and disappeared to avoid debt collectors. I smiled when I read that. It was strange, almost poetic. The same people who tried to destroy my name were now using my absence as a way to explain away their guilt. But their rumor mill was running out of fuel, and soon they'd have a much bigger problem. Because while they'd been telling stories, I'd been building one of my own. Over the previous months, I'd taken all the evidence, every forged document, every threatening message, every fake application, and quietly compiled it into a digital case file. Ethan helped me format it into a 90-page dossier. Carter versus Carter family, evidence of fraud, defamation, and identity theft. We didn't file it. Not yet. I wanted it ready for the moment I'd need it most. Around that time, something unexpected happened. One of my clients, a mid-sized marketing firm based in Spain, offered me a partnership. They'd been so impressed with my consulting work that they wanted to bring me on as a silent equity partner. It wasn't a huge firm, but it had reach across Europe. They wanted my name, my systems, and my strategies, and in return, I'd get 20% ownership. It was more than validation. It was power. For the first time in my life, I didn't just have money, I had leverage. I could shape decisions, influence projects, and build something that no one could take from me. The day I signed that contract, I took myself to dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Tagus River. The waiter brought out a small cake with a single candle after hearing it was my birthday week. 42. My phone sat face down beside me, no notifications from anyone back home. And somehow, that emptiness felt right. When I got back to my apartment that night, I checked my email one last time before bed. That's when I saw it. A message from my mom. The subject line, "Enough is enough." I hovered over it for a full minute before opening it. "Jack, we heard you've been living in Europe, acting like none of us exist. Your father's been worried sick. Adam's had a rough year, and you've made everything worse. Whatever you think we did, we were only trying to help. It's time to come home and fix this. You owe your brother a public apology. We're meeting with a lawyer soon, and if you keep avoiding us, we'll have to move forward without your cooperation." Mom. The old me would have frozen. The old me would have spent nights crafting a polite reply, trying to diffuse the tension, trying to make peace. But not this version of me. I didn't respond. I just added it to the evidence folder, one more line in the story of how far they'd fallen. That summer, my life accelerated. Carter Digital expanded rapidly. I brought on 2 part-time analysts, built a small but loyal client base in 3 countries, and started giving online lectures about small business cybersecurity. Ironically, my main talking point was about protecting yourself from people you think you can trust. Each month that passed without contact from my family felt like breathing deeper after years underwater. But the world has a strange sense of timing. Just when things were at their best, a message arrived that stirred everything back up. It was from Emily again. "They found out about your company." My heart skipped. "How?" She followed it up seconds later. "Adam bragged about it at a family barbecue. He said you're doing shady offshore stuff, that you stole ideas from him. Your mom told people you're under investigation." For a moment, I just stared at the screen in disbelief. Then I laughed, quietly at first, then louder, until it echoed off the apartment walls. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. They couldn't ruin me through lies anymore, so they resorted to creating new ones. But what they didn't know was that every word they said could, and would, come back to destroy them. I called Ethan that night. "It's time," I said simply. "Time for what?" "For them to finally see what happens when you push someone too far." He didn't need more context. Within a week, he had the necessary paperwork ready, a formal cease and desist letter, followed by an intent to sue notice citing defamation, fraud, and attempted identity theft. But we didn't send it to them directly. We sent it through an attorney my parents knew, a longtime family friend who handled their wills and property. That way, there'd be no way to spin it as a stranger's attack. It would come from someone they trusted, in black and white legal language they couldn't ignore. When the letters were delivered, I didn't hear anything for days, then weeks, until one morning, Emily messaged me again. "Your mom called an emergency family meeting. Adam's freaking out. Dad's been pacing all day." I didn't respond right away. I was sitting at my desk overlooking the harbor, sunlight spilling across the water. My coffee steamed beside me, emails from clients pinging one after another. For the first time in my life, they were the ones spiraling, and I was the one sitting in peace. That night, as the city lights shimmered below, I realized something simple but profound. Revenge didn't always need to be dramatic. Sometimes, it was just living better, freer, and louder than the people who tried to destroy you. And yet, even as things flourished, I knew deep down the story wasn't over. Because power doesn't just silence your enemies. It makes them desperate. And my family was about to get very desperate. A few days after Emily's message, I woke up to an email notification from Ethan marked urgent. I opened it expecting a legal update, but it wasn't that. It was something bigger. "Jack," he wrote, "I think I found something you'll want to see. Call me." When I called, he sounded half amused, half stunned. "Your brother tried to register a business under your company's name." "What?" "Yeah," he said, typing audibly in the background. "Carter Digital Systems, same name, different jurisdiction. He filed it 2 weeks ago in Washington, with a fake address and your old phone number. Probably to confuse clients or impersonate your firm. He listed himself as co-founder and your mom as a guarantor." For a moment, I was too shocked to speak. They hadn't learned a thing. "Ethan," I said slowly, "if he's pretending to be me, that's actionable, right?" He chuckled darkly. "It's not just actionable, Jack. It's criminal. He's impersonating an international business. You could bury him with this." And that's when the idea started to form. Not a plan built from rage, but from precision. If they wanted to play games with my name, I was going to make sure that name carried weight. That afternoon, I called Miguel, the partner at my Spanish firm. He was a sharp businessman, good instincts, and had once mentioned that he'd been trying to expand operations into North America. "I might have a contact," I told him. "There's a company using our brand illegally in the US. I can make sure we own that territory cleanly, legally, and profitably." Within a week, Carter Digital Systems became a registered multinational. We filed trademarks, obtained copyright protection, and issued a public statement on our new US expansion. The announcement went live online, LinkedIn, business directories, even a small press release written by Miguel's PR team. 2 days later, Adam's fake company was hit with a legal takedown. Every registration he filed was invalidated. But that wasn't the real revenge. The real revenge was what came next. Because once Carter Digital became official, I started getting calls from his old contacts. Apparently, Adam had been using my name to network, pitching himself as my business partner. People had grown suspicious after my official launch. Some even sent me screenshots of messages where he claimed I'd cut him out of the deal. One email stood out. It was from a small investor who had sent Adam a deposit, $12,000, for marketing materials. He wrote, "Jack, I'm not sure what's going on, but I hope you're aware that your brother's been using your name to solicit funds. I've already contacted the authorities." I forwarded everything to Ethan. Within hours, he'd compiled a formal complaint and sent it to the state attorney general's office. Then I waited. While I waited, I focused on growing my company. It was strangely therapeutic, channeling every ounce of my energy into something they couldn't touch. My network expanded rapidly. I hired freelancers, streamlined client onboarding, and landed 2 major contracts with European firms. Each time a payment hit my account, I felt another layer of their control peel away. But the real shift wasn't financial, it was psychological. For the first time in years, I was the one holding the cards. Then, out of nowhere, I got another email from my mom. This one was shorter and far less confident. "We need to talk. Adam's in trouble. Please." I didn't reply, but I did call Emily that night. "What happened?" I asked. She hesitated. "The police came to the house. Something about fraud and false filings. They confiscated Adam's laptop. Your dad's furious. Your mom's blaming you, obviously." Of course she was. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything or brag. I just let it unfold naturally, like gravity taking over once you've stepped aside. About a week later, another message arrived, this time from an unknown address. "You think this is funny? They're threatening to freeze my accounts. You could have helped me, but you had to be the hero. Congrats, Jack. You won." I didn't even finish reading it. I deleted it and went for a walk by the river instead. That's when I realized how poetic it all was. My revenge wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was quiet, methodical, the kind that leaves no debris. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't retaliated in anger. I'd simply built something honest and let their lies collapse under their own weight. But fate wasn't done yet. A few days later, Miguel called me from Spain, sounding oddly amused. "Jack, you're not going to believe this. We just received a partnership inquiry from a US business calling itself Carter Solutions, LLC. The email was from a woman named Margaret Carter. I felt my stomach tighten. That's my mother. She introduced herself as your mother. Actually, he continued. She said your company has been misrepresenting family interests and that she'd like to negotiate licensing rights. She even mentioned something about wanting to restore the family brand. I could almost picture her writing it, trying to wrap deceit in politeness. Miguel, I said calmly, forward it to me. Don't reply. When I opened the email, I almost laughed. It was written like a formal business letter, full of corporate buzzwords she clearly didn't understand. But what stood out most was the line at the bottom. We're prepared to resolve this privately, as families should. Family. That word again. Their shield and their weapon. That was when I decided how it would end. I spent that evening going through the 90-page dossier Ethan and I had built. Every document, every email, every recorded call was there. All it needed was one final update, their most recent attempt to profit off my company's name. When it was done, I printed it, signed the affidavit, and scanned it back to Ethan with a single message, file it. He didn't ask for confirmation twice. By the following week, official complaints were lodged with the authorities in both Washington State and the EU Intellectual Property Office. My family's fake ventures, fraudulent filings, and financial tampering were all under investigation. And still, I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. I just sat in my office by the water, the sun reflecting off the waves, and breathed. Really breathed, for the first time in years. I'd gone from the scapegoat to the architect, from the outcast to the one quietly pulling the strings. And yet, deep down, I knew this was just the setup, the calm before the real reckoning. Because my family had built their entire identity on control. The moment they realized they'd lost it completely, they'd break. And when they did, I'd be ready. When the fallout began, it didn't come all at once. It came in waves, small at first, almost quiet. But each one hit harder than the last. The first call came from Ethan. They've officially opened an investigation, he said. Your brother's name is listed as a respondent in a fraud case. Your mother's as a co-signer on forged documents. And there's talk about possible tax evasion tied to the fake company. I didn't say anything at first. Just sat there, listening to the hum of my laptop and the muffled sounds of the city outside. Jack, he said finally, you did everything by the book. Whatever happens next, it's not on you. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the tide roll in. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the kind of sunset that looked like closure. The next morning, the messages started. From Mom. How could you do this to your own family? You've humiliated us. They're freezing our accounts. Your father can't even get his pension money right now. You've gone too far. From Dad. You didn't have to make it public. We could have worked this out. You should have just come home. And from Adam, predictably full of venom. You think you're better than us now? You ruined my life. They took my car. My business account's gone. Are you happy? For once, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. For years, they'd weaponized my empathy, used family as a leash to drag me back every time I tried to move forward. But this time, I'd cut it clean. A few weeks later, Emily called. Her voice was soft, careful. Jack, it's chaos here. The house was seized for unpaid taxes. Your parents moved in with Aunt Linda temporarily. Adam's staying with some friend out of town. Everyone's fighting. Your mom's blaming your dad. Your dad's blaming Adam, and Adam's blaming you. Let them, I said quietly. They built the fire. I just stopped holding the matches. Still, part of me wanted to know more. So Emily told me. After the investigation started, everything unraveled. The fake business accounts were frozen. The tax discrepancies surfaced. Then came the audit. Turns out Adam had been funneling what little money he could through fake invoices in my name, thinking no one would ever trace them. They did. My parents' names appeared on several of the documents as verifiers. That was enough to trigger a full financial review. Their credit line was suspended. Their house, partially tied to the business filings, was flagged for investigation. It didn't take long before the community found out. My mom's carefully curated image, the sweet, church-going mother who just wanted her sons to get along, shattered. People stopped visiting. Neighbors whispered. Her bridge club quietly removed her name from the roster. Dad lost most of his savings paying legal fees. Adam tried to blame everything on him, then on technical errors, then on me again. But the paperwork didn't lie. The timestamps, the forged signatures, the emails, they all pointed back to him. Within months, he was ordered to repay the investors he'd scammed under my name. When he couldn't, they took him to civil court. He settled, barely avoiding criminal charges, but his credit and reputation were gone. As for my parents, the state dropped criminal proceedings against them in exchange for cooperation, but the damage was irreversible. They lost the house. Their accounts stayed frozen for months. My mom's health declined under the stress, and my dad, always too proud to admit failure, refused to speak to most of the extended family. I never reached out, not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. They'd taught me what love with conditions looked like, and I'd finally learned to live without it. One evening, maybe a year later, I got another call from Emily. "You should know," she said. "Your mom wanted to send you a letter. She never did, but she told me to tell you she didn't mean for it to go that far." I sat there in silence for a while, then said, "Tell her I forgive her." Because I did. Forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about me refusing to carry their weight any longer. Life moved on quietly after that. My business flourished. Carter Digital expanded across Europe, then Asia. I hired a small team, bought a house near the coast, and learned Portuguese well enough to joke with the locals at the cafe. Every once in a while, I'd get an email from an old friend back home asking if I'd ever visit. I always said, maybe someday. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't. The last time I heard from Adam was 2 years later. A short message, almost pitiful. "I heard your company's doing well. Good for you. Guess you were always the smart one." No apology. No remorse. Just envy dressed as humility. I didn't reply. That night, I took a walk along the cliffs, the same path I'd walked when I first came here, lost and broken. The sea roared beneath me, endless and untamed. I thought about how far I'd come, not through luck, but through finally choosing myself over people who never would have. I stopped at the edge, the wind tugging at my shirt, and whispered, "You can't lose a family that never loved you unconditionally." For a long moment, I stood there in the fading light, the waves crashing below. Then I smiled, small, genuine, unburdened. They had taken everything they could from me. But what they could never touch was the peace that comes when you stop needing people to see your worth. And as the sun disappeared over the Atlantic, I walked back home. No guilt, no noise, no ghosts. Just freedom. They say success is the best revenge. I used to believe that. I used to think that if I just worked hard enough, kept my head down, climbed the ladder rung by rung while others cut corners or coasted on handouts, I'd finally be free, free of the judgment, the guilt tripping, the endless comparisons. But what no one tells you is that when you come from a family that needs you to stay small so they can feel big, success doesn't set you free. It paints a target on your back. My name's Nathan. I'm 27 years old, a software engineer working for one of the biggest names in tech. The kind of place that makes your LinkedIn blow up just for adding the company logo. I live in a sleek downtown penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, a skyline view, and a coffee machine that costs more than the car I drove in college. On paper, I've made it. But behind the scenes, there's a whole different story brewing, the kind you wouldn't believe unless you lived through it. And unfortunately, I did. I didn't grow up in luxury. I wasn't handed anything. My parents weren't cruel, exactly, just conditional. Everything was a transaction. Love, attention, pride. You had to earn it. And even then, it came with strings. My younger brother, Brandon, never had to worry about that. He was the golden child. He could bomb out of classes, get arrested for petty vandalism twice, and still be met with, "He's just figuring himself out." Me? One missed homework assignment in 8th grade, and I got the silent treatment for a week. When I told my parents I wanted to go to college out of state, they laughed. Not a chuckle. A full-on belly laugh, like I'd just said I wanted to be an astronaut at 18. "You think we're going to take out loans for that? Be serious, Nathan." So I got serious. I worked 2 part-time jobs through high school, saved every dollar. In college, I averaged 70 to 80 hours a week between classes, tutoring, food delivery, and night shifts at a security desk where I coded on a beat-up laptop while watching grainy CCTV footage. I lived off caffeine pills and dollar menu burgers. I didn't party. I didn't date. I barely slept. But I graduated at the top of my class, built a few side projects that went semi-viral on GitHub, and landed an internship at a firm that eventually led to my current role. I never took a penny from my parents, and I never once held it against them, or at least I told myself I didn't. Brandon, meanwhile, bounced around majors for 6 years, and dropped out twice. He never worked a real job, just odd gigs my dad lined up through his buddies. My parents kept telling him to find his passion, like that was a valid excuse for coasting into his mid-20s. When he finally settled on a photography business, they basically funded it. New camera, studio space, even covered his rent for a year to help him get on his feet. I remember coming home for Thanksgiving once during that time and seeing Brandon's new apartment. It had exposed brick walls, a giant canvas print of New York City, and an espresso bar. I was sleeping on a stained futon above a noisy taco shop at the time, and when I made a comment about how nice the place was, my mom just said, "Well, he's pursuing his dream, Nathan. That's hard too." I didn't argue. I just smiled, ate my turkey, and went back to grinding. A few months ago, after years of scraping and saving, investing smartly, and catching some lucky breaks with stock options, I made the biggest purchase of my life, a modern penthouse condo smack in the heart of the city. It was everything I had fantasized about during those broke college nights. Clean lines, panoramic views, high ceilings, and best of all, complete silence. No one yelling. No guilt tripping. No constant noise from upstairs neighbors. Just me, my work, and the sound of the espresso machine humming in the background. I didn't even post it on social media. I wasn't trying to show off. I told maybe 4 people, my best friend, my mentor, and yeah, my family. I wasn't going to hide it. I figured maybe, for once, they'd be proud. My dad's reaction was lukewarm at best. He asked how much I put down, what the interest rate was, and if I had considered buying somewhere less flashy. My mom just stared at the photos I showed her, then said, "Wow, must be nice." And Brandon? He didn't say anything, just scrolled through the pics, set the phone down, and mumbled something about needing to get back to editing. I brushed it off. I told myself they were just surprised. Maybe they didn't know how to express excitement. Maybe they felt left behind. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that I got the call. "Nathan," my mom said, her voice weirdly formal. "We'd like to have a family dinner. Just us. Sunday night." I asked if everything was okay. She said it was just a conversation. No big deal. The moment I walked into their house that Sunday, the same house I grew up in, with the same creaky staircase and lemon-scented candles, I felt it. That tension, like I was being summoned, not invited. My parents were already seated at the dining table, both looking unusually serious. Brandon was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, jaw tight. "We wanted to talk," my dad began, "because there's been some hurt feelings lately." My stomach dropped. My mom folded her hands like she was leading a therapy session. "Nathan, we're happy for you. Really. But we've noticed your brother's been feeling inadequate. Like he can't measure up." Brandon didn't look at me. He stared at the floor. "And," she continued, "we think it might help if you scaled things back a little. At least for now." I blinked. "What does that mean?" My dad cleared his throat. "Well, this penthouse situation. It's a bit much, don't you think? You're only 27. You could get a nice apartment, live reasonably, save more. No need to be flashy. You think I should sell my home?" I asked, making sure I heard him right. "We're not saying that directly," my mom rushed in. "Just consider how it looks. How it makes Brandon feel. He's trying, you know. He's had some rough luck. And then you come in with this palace." Brandon finally spoke, his voice low. "It just feels like you're rubbing it in, man." I stared at them, my heart pounding. For a second, I actually wondered if I'd fallen into some surreal prank show. Like there had to be hidden cameras. "I worked for that place," I said quietly. "I didn't win it in a raffle. I gave up everything for years. And we're not denying that," my mom said, palms raised. "But family is about balance. About keeping each other in check." My dad nodded. "It's about harmony. And right now, the dynamic is off." Something cracked in me then. Not loudly, not all at once, just a small, internal snap. Like a wire that had been pulled too tight for too long. I stood up, calmly, and said, "Thanks for the dinner. I've got work in the morning." I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't argue. I just left, got in my car, drove home to my palace, and sat in silence for an hour staring at the skyline I had spent a decade chasing. I wish I could say that after that family dinner, the one where my parents politely suggested I sell my home because it made my brother feel inadequate, things simmered down. I thought I'd made my boundaries clear. I thought leaving quietly would send a message. But if anything, it made things worse. like I had insulted some unspoken hierarchy by refusing to shrink myself. And over the next few weeks, the tension escalated in a way I couldn't have predicted. Subtle at first, then not so subtle. It started with the texts. At first, they were harmless enough. My mom forwarding me links to affordable downtown lofts with notes like, "See, this one's more modest, but still cute." Or, "Wouldn't it be nice to have neighbors more your age?" I didn't respond. Then came the guilt-trippy stuff. "Brandon hasn't been sleeping well. He keeps comparing himself to you. It's breaking my heart." Or my personal favorite, "Success means nothing if it tears a family apart." I ignored those too. That's when the others got involved. My aunt called me out of the blue, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. She launched into a faux concerned monologue about how proud everyone was of me. But maybe I should consider how hard it must be for Brandon to constantly live in my shadow. "You've always been the driven one," she said sweetly, like I'd been hoarding ambition unfairly. "Maybe tone it down a bit, for everyone's sake." Tone it down. For everyone's sake. I asked her if she'd be willing to tell Brandon to tone down the freeloading. She didn't like that. After that, my mom tried a different angle. She invited me over for a just us lunch. No dad, no Brandon. I was skeptical, but curious. I showed up to find the dining table already set, pasta boiling on the stove, and my mom in her full apron and smile routine. She chatted about the weather, a new neighbor's dog, random bits of gossip, until finally, she slid a manila folder across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Just something to consider." Inside were brochures. Therapy centers. Specifically, family counseling services. She sat across from me with that practiced, pitying expression that always meant she thought she was being generous. "I think we all need to heal," she said. "You've been so angry." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "I've been angry. You stormed out of dinner, Nathan. Because you asked me to sell my home to protect Brandon's ego. Because we were trying to help you see the bigger picture." That lunch ended with me leaving mid-bite. After that, the gloves came off. Brandon started showing up to my place uninvited. He'd text me 5 minutes before, or not at all. The first time, he buzzed my unit claiming he was downtown for a shoot and needed to use my place to charge his equipment. I said no. He buzzed again. And again. I ignored him. 20 minutes later, I checked the building camera from my phone. He was still there, pacing in the lobby, visibly irritated. Next day, I got a furious message from my dad. "Family means being there for each other, not slamming doors in people's faces." I replied, "Family also means boundaries." No response. Week after that, Brandon came by again. This time with coffee and donuts like it was some casual drop-in. I met him in the lobby before he could come up. "Thought I'd bring breakfast," he said, holding up the bag. "I'm working." "You're always working." "Because that's how I got here." He stared at me, then dropped the bag on the front desk and walked off. Didn't say another word. I didn't eat the donuts. I didn't hear from him for a while after that. Just radio silence from the whole family. I'd be lying if I said it didn't mess with me. I tried to focus on work, long hours, side projects, running teams, but the quiet got loud sometimes. That little voice that whispers, "Maybe you really are the problem. Maybe you could have handled it differently." Then came the betrayal. It happened on a Saturday morning. I was still in bed, scrolling emails, when I got a ping from my building manager. "Hi Nathan, just a quick note. Your brother dropped off the photography prints for the lobby exhibit. We'll be installing them later today." I stared at the message, completely confused. My building often rotated local artwork in the lobby, photos, sculptures, paintings. I'd even recommended a few friends from art school days. But I hadn't submitted anyone recently, and I definitely hadn't signed Brandon up. I replied, "Sorry, what prints?" "Manager, Brandon said you cleared it. Said you wanted to support his work and thought the lobby would be perfect. He had access to the elevator already." Seemed legit. I jumped out of bed, threw on sweats, and bolted downstairs. And there they were. 4 massive photography canvases leaned against the lobby wall, ready to be mounted. Stylized black and white portraits, moody, dramatic, very on-brand for Brandon. But what caught me off guard were the captions. In bold, elegant font under each image. "Success isn't always earned. Privilege in disguise. Some people climb on the backs of others. Not all penthouses are homes." I froze. My hands started to shake. A few residents were milling around, glancing at the prints, murmuring things I couldn't quite hear. One of them, an older woman from the 14th floor, actually smiled at me. These are powerful, she said. Very raw. Who's the artist? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I went straight to the manager's office and demanded they be removed. He looked bewildered but complied. Brandon didn't respond to my calls. Not that day, not the next. Finally, I drove out to my parents' house. Knocked on the door, heart pounding. My mom opened it like she'd been expecting me. We didn't mean to upset you, she said, before I could speak. You knew? She didn't answer. I pushed past her, into the living room, where Brandon was sitting on the couch, feet up, scrolling on his phone. You forged my name, I said. You accessed my building under false pretenses. It was art, he replied flatly. No, it was a hit job. He finally looked up. His face was stone cold. You've made it clear you don't care about this family. I was just returning the favor. I was speechless. Not because of the words, but the ease with which he said them. Like this had been building in him for years, and now that he'd found a way to hurt me, he'd never felt more alive. You could have asked for help, Brandon. He scoffed. You don't offer help. You flaunt what you have. You think just because you suffered, it gives you the right to look down on everyone else. I don't look down on you, I said. I didn't. But maybe I should have. That was the last thing I said before I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. But something had shifted in me that day, something permanent. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was done. Or at least I thought I was. Because 2 days later, I got a letter. A real letter. Handwritten. From my dad. And what was inside made everything before it look like a warm-up act. If you want to hear what was in that letter, I'll tell you. But brace yourself. It changes everything. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just finished a call with my project lead and was debating whether to make lunch or skip straight to my afternoon meetings. I wasn't expecting anything. I rarely got physical mail outside of utility bills or the occasional real estate flyer. But this one stood out. Cream-colored envelope. Heavyweight paper. My name handwritten in my dad's distinct, square lettering. No return address. Something about it made my stomach tighten. I sat on the edge of the kitchen counter, opened the envelope with a butter knife, and unfolded the 2-page letter inside. The handwriting was familiar, steady, but each word felt like a gut punch. Not because it was cruel. I almost wish it had been, but because it was deliberate, cold, calculated. Like he had rehearsed every sentence in his head before putting it down, knowing exactly how it would land. He began with something that looked like empathy. Nathan, I've always admired your discipline. Your ability to shut out distractions and chase your goals. That's not easy. And I'm proud of you, we both are. But there's something more important than achievement. Balance. Family. Then he pivoted. I've been speaking with your brother. He's going through a hard time. Your recent choices have made things worse. Whether intentional or not, you've created distance between yourself and this family. Your tone, your attitude, your lifestyle, they send a message. One that says, I'm better. That message has hurt your brother deeply. And it's forced your mother and me to reevaluate how we move forward as a family. That's when he dropped the bomb. As of this week, we've decided to temporarily restructure the family trust. The trust. I didn't even know there was a family trust. My parents weren't wealthy by any means, middle class at best, but I knew my grandfather had owned land upstate that had been passed down when he died. Acres of undeveloped forest, worth more than most people realized. I'd always assumed it was being held for retirement or maybe some future family emergency. My dad never spoke of it in detail. It was one of those we'll talk about it someday topics that got buried under small talk and football games. Apparently, someday had arrived, just without me. He continued. We've named Brandon as the primary beneficiary for the next 5 years. It's not about favoritism. It's about need. We hope you understand that this isn't punishment. It's protection. For the family. If you're willing to meet us halfway, this can change. But if you continue down your current path, you may force our hand long-term. The door is always open. But so is the window of opportunity. I read the letter twice. 3 times. Each time, it made less sense and hurt more. It wasn't about money. Not really. It was about being written out, symbolically and literally. My entire life, I had tried to play by the rules. Work hard. Be responsible. Stay humble. I hadn't asked for anything. Not once. And now, the one time something was available, I wasn't just passed over. I was threatened. I sat in my apartment, the city spread out below me, and felt completely, utterly hollow. Over the next few weeks, I spiraled. Not dramatically. Not in the way people imagine when they think rock bottom. I still woke up, logged into work, answered emails, attended meetings. But I was checked out. My focus evaporated. Deadlines crept up faster than usual. I stopped working out, stopped cooking, started ordering takeout every night. I left dishes in the sink. I missed a friend's birthday dinner and forgot to call back another who left a voicemail saying he was worried about me. I ghosted my mentor. I didn't even realize how far I'd slipped until my manager pulled me aside during a Zoom call. "Nathan," she said gently, "this isn't like you." I wanted to lie, to say I was fine. But instead, I just said, "I know." She gave me some time off. A week. No questions asked. I thought about using it to take a trip, escape somewhere, reset. But the truth was, I didn't have the energy. So I stayed home, slept in, binge-watched old sci-fi shows, and stared at my phone more than I care to admit. One night, around 2 a.m., I was scrolling through an old photo album on my phone. Pictures from college, mostly grainy shots of my first apartment, screenshots of early code projects, selfies with friends I barely spoke to now. And then I found a video I didn't remember taking. It was me, age 21, sitting on the roof of my college dorm. I was talking to the camera, half joking, half serious. If future me ever sees this, congrats. You made it. I hope you've got a real coffee machine and not this instant junk. But seriously, don't forget what it felt like to want it this bad. To work this hard. You owe that kid something. I watched it twice. Then again. I don't know why, but something about that version of me, hungry, tired, hopeful, hit harder than anything my parents had said. I didn't recognize him completely, but I remembered the feeling. The fire. I stayed up all night after that. Not crying. Not plotting revenge. Just thinking. Next morning, I woke up and cleaned my entire apartment. Top to bottom. Threw out every piece of takeout trash. Washed the dishes. Did laundry. Made my bed like I hadn't in weeks. Then I sat down at my desk, opened a blank doc, and started writing something I hadn't written in years, a product concept. Not for work. Not for anyone else. Just for me. It was an idea I'd had ages ago. A tool for freelancers to track income, expenses, and contracts in one clean dashboard. I had shelved it during my early days at the company, thinking I didn't have time. But now, I needed something that felt like mine again. Something that reminded me who I was before I let their voices get in my head. I built a prototype in 2 weeks. Nothing fancy. Just a bare-bones interface and some back-end logic. But it worked. And more importantly, it gave me purpose. I didn't tell anyone. I kept working on it in the evenings, slowly rebuilding my schedule. I got back to journaling, meal prepping, working out. Started attending team meetings with real input again. My manager noticed. So did a few coworkers. They started sending me bigger tasks again, harder problems. I crushed them. Quietly. Steadily. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was chasing approval. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just living. A month passed. Then 2. I stopped checking in on Brandon's socials. I muted the family group chat. I told myself I'd re-engage when I was ready. When I wanted to. And not a second before. One day, I came home to a note taped to my door. "Can we talk?" B. No envelope. No text. Just 3 words. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to tear it up. Burn it. But I didn't. I took it inside, placed it on the counter, and left it there. I didn't call him. Instead, I kept building. The tool I had started, now called Ledgerlight, had grown. I'd onboard a few freelancer friends as beta testers. Feedback was promising. One even offered to invest. I turned it down. I wasn't ready for that yet. But it lit a fuse. I started planning a soft launch. Bought a domain. Hired a designer to clean up the UI. Built a waitlist landing page. And one morning, as I was reviewing metrics, I realized something. I hadn't thought about the trust. The betrayal. The letter. In weeks. Not because I had healed, but because I had shifted the focus. They hadn't won. They had tried to knock me off center. And for a while, they did. But I found something they never expected me to find. Myself. The version of me that wasn't defined by their approval or guilt. The version that didn't need validation from parents who only loved me conditionally, or a brother who resented my existence. That version, he was just getting started. But then, just when I thought I had finally built enough distance, something happened that pulled me back into the fire. A voicemail. From my mom. Tearful. Breathy. Rambling. "I didn't know they were going to do this, Nathan. I swear. Please call me. It's gone too far. Your brother, your father. I can't fix this alone. That's when I knew. Something had changed. Something big. And this time, I wasn't going to walk away. I was going to respond, but on my terms. I didn't call her back right away. That might sound cruel, especially after a voicemail that emotional. But you have to understand, my mother is a master of tone. She knows exactly when to use warmth and when to play the victim. I grew up watching her wield it like a scalpel. Soft voice, quivering breath, dramatic pauses. Always stopping just short of actually saying anything direct. Always forcing you to connect the dots, feel the guilt, fill in the blanks. She never left messages like that. And she especially never admitted she couldn't fix something. That was the first clue that whatever happened, it wasn't just a spat or another round of think of your brother. This was deeper, more volatile. But I wasn't about to walk into another emotional ambush. Not this time. I had worked too hard to reclaim my peace, to remember who I was without the noise. So I did something I never would have done 6 months ago. I didn't react. I strategized. First, I saved the voicemail. Downloaded a copy. I didn't even know if I'd need it, but my gut said this was going to get complicated. Then I sent a quick message to someone I hadn't spoken to in a long while. Hey, can I buy you coffee this week? I need to talk. Family stuff. That someone was Jamie, a childhood friend of mine who'd grown up a few blocks over. We lost touch after high school, reconnected briefly in college, then drifted again. But Jamie knew my family, had seen the dynamics, heard the arguments, been there the night my dad made Brandon lie about breaking the garage door, then punished me when I tried to correct the story. Jamie had always called it like it was. 2 days later, we met at this little cafe off 6th Street. Low lighting, good pastries, quiet jazz in the background. I didn't even sit down before she gave me a look and said, "Okay, what happened now?" I told her everything. From the penthouse guilt tripping to the fake art exhibit, the trust betrayal, the fallout, and finally, the voicemail. She listened the whole way through without interrupting. Sipped her coffee, eyes sharp. At one point, she muttered, "Unreal," under her breath. When I finally finished, she leaned forward and said, "They're bleeding you, Nate. Just emotionally instead of financially." I know. No, I don't think you do. This isn't about the money or the apartment. It's about control. You're the only one who ever broke out of their little orbit, and now they're trying to drag you back. I stared down at my cup. So what do I do? Her lips curved into something between a smirk and a challenge. You stop defending and start playing offense. I blinked. What does that even look like? Jamie tapped her finger on the table. You said there's a trust. You were written out. Brandon was made sole beneficiary temporarily. For 5 years. Does it have to be 5 years? I frowned. My dad made it sound like the decision was final. Jamie raised an eyebrow. Doesn't mean it's legal. That's when the first piece of the plan came into focus. I didn't know the specifics of the trust, when it was set up, how it was structured, what rights I had. But if there was a document, there were laws around how it could be changed. Especially if it was my grandfather's land. That made it generational. Possibly irrevocable. So I made another call. This time, to an attorney. Not just any attorney. A former mentor of mine who had transitioned from software law to estate litigation a few years back. I didn't have to tell him much. Just enough for him to agree to review any documents I could get. You're not filing anything yet, he warned. We're just gathering information. Be smart. Smart. That meant not storming into my parents' house demanding answers. It meant baiting them, gently. So I sent a message to my dad. Short. Calm. Almost passive. Hey, got mom's voicemail. Hope everything's okay. Want to catch up this weekend? Maybe clear the air. He replied in under 5 minutes. Glad to hear from you. Sunday afternoon work. Perfect. It felt too easy, which made me even more cautious. When I arrived that Sunday, my mom looked pale. Nervous. She opened the door and pulled me into a hug before I could stop her. Thank you for coming, she whispered. My dad was seated in the den, legs crossed, expression unreadable. Brandon wasn't there. That alone told me something was wrong. He was always at the center of these little dramas. We made small talk. Tea. Snacks. Weather. Then I asked casually, "So, what's going on?" They exchanged a glance. My dad cleared his throat. "Your brother's going through a rough patch." I waited. He took out a business loan last year, he continued, to expand the studio. Bought equipment, leased a second location. That was news to me. He fell behind on payments. Missed deadlines. Some legal stuff is happening now. What kind of legal stuff? My mom winced. He defaulted. The lender's threatening asset seizure. I sat back. And this affects me how? More glances. My dad finally said it. He used part of the trust as collateral. My stomach dropped. I blinked. He what? My mom stepped in. It wasn't the main land parcel, just a sliver. A few acres. He thought he could flip the profit quickly. Which part? I asked sharply. The East Ridge, my dad muttered. That was the most developable portion. The one with road access. I didn't even know he had access to do that, I said. He shouldn't have, my mom said quickly. But your father, we thought it would help him get stable. Let me guess, I said, leaning forward. The paperwork wasn't clean. Now the whole trust is being reviewed. Neither of them spoke. I stood up, walked to the window, took a breath. Then I turned. I want to see the documents. All of them. Original trust. Addendums. Transfers. My dad stiffened. That's private. Not if it affects my legal inheritance. Not if Brandon's actions are jeopardizing it. You can either let me review it with a lawyer, or I subpoena it. Your choice. It was the first time I'd ever seen my father truly angry. Not yelling, not slamming fists, but that low, simmering fury that came from someone used to holding power and suddenly realizing they didn't have it anymore. You've changed, he said coldly. No, I replied. I've just stopped apologizing. I left with no hug, no goodbye, no snacks wrapped in foil like old times. 3 days later, my lawyer had scanned copies of the trust and all its modifications. And sure enough, my name had been quietly removed through a document that, according to him, wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. The trust had been set up by my grandfather with a specific clause. No alterations can be made unless all named beneficiaries agree in writing. I never signed anything. My signature was nowhere to be found, which meant the 5-year restructure was not only illegitimate, it was grounds for a full reversal, possibly even legal action. Jamie was the first person I told. We met again at the cafe, and when I laid out the facts, her grin grew with every detail. So what now, she asked. I exhaled slowly. Now, I said, we stop playing defense. I gave them one more chance. Not out of mercy, but out of strategy. After reviewing the documents, my lawyer and I crafted a simple, polite letter addressed to both of my parents. It outlined, without emotion or judgment, the legal inconsistencies in the amended trust. It cited the original clause from my grandfather that prevented unilateral changes. It highlighted the absence of my signature. It closed with a clear, non-confrontational request. We respectfully ask for the immediate reversal of the unauthorized modifications, including the removal of Nathan Carter as a beneficiary. If not resolved by date, we will proceed through the appropriate legal channels. The deadline was 2 weeks out. I didn't hear anything for 13 days. No texts, no calls, no knocks on my door. Just silence, like the kind that settles in right before a storm. On the 14th day, I received an email. It was from my dad. No greeting. No apology, just a PDF. The trust has been amended and restored to its original form. Brandon's authority has been revoked. You're reinstated. Consider this matter closed. I showed the email to my lawyer. He smiled. It's done. You win. But that wasn't the revenge. That was just the warning shot. Because here's the thing. They thought the issue was over because the paperwork was fixed. What they didn't realize was how much damage they'd already done. Not to my finances, but to my name. My trust, my reputation. Remember the photography exhibit Brandon tried to install in my building lobby? The one where he snuck in my building and displayed slanderous captions like privilege in disguise and not all penthouses are homes. Yeah, I hadn't forgotten either. And now that the legal threat had passed, I had the bandwidth and the motivation to make sure Brandon learned a lesson of his own. I started small. A DM to a gallery manager I knew through a mutual friend. Someone Brandon had been trying to woo for months. I sent her the lobby photos Brandon had tried to install in my building, along with a short message. Thought you should see the kind of work he tries to push without consent. She replied 2 hours later. Thanks. That crosses a line. We won't be moving forward with him. Then I moved to his lease. Remember the second studio space he leased for expansion? Through some online research and a LinkedIn post he'd made months earlier, I figured out the building. I didn't contact the landlord directly. I didn't need to. I contacted a friend who worked for a commercial real estate firm in the area. I gave him Brandon's business name and asked if the owner had ever made late payments or tried to sublet. My friend laughed. Yeah, that guy's a mess. Hasn't paid for 2 months. Wants to renegotiate the lease, but won't return paperwork. I didn't say anything incriminating. I didn't push. But the conversation made its way back to the landlord. 2 weeks later, Brandon lost the space. Strike 2. Finally, I went after his real currency, his image. Brandon had built a modest social media following as a visionary creative, 12K followers on Instagram, a curated aesthetic, inspirational quotes, carefully filtered behind-the-scenes reels. I created a fake account, followed his page, and waited. Soon, he posted a new series called The Art of the Climb, with captions about overcoming adversity, building his business without handouts, and chasing success without compromising values. I screenshotted the post. Then I uploaded a side-by-side comparison. The post versus a scan of the letter my dad had sent me months earlier, the one where he admitted Brandon used the trust as collateral for his business loan. I didn't include identifying information. No address. No docs. Just a caption. Curious definition of without handouts. Then I let the internet do its thing. Within 24 hours, Brandon locked his account. Strike 3. The fallout was quick. I didn't hear from him again. No apology. No attempt to reconcile. Just silence. His name disappeared from my building's directory. Apparently, he had been living in a friend's apartment nearby. Gone now. My parents, on the other hand, tried one last maneuver. An invitation. Dinner. At their house. To talk. I considered ignoring it. But I needed closure. So I went. It was just the two of them. Brandon wasn't there. The dining room was pristine. Napkins folded. China I hadn't seen since Christmas 5 years ago. My mom served roast beef. My dad poured wine. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Until my mom set down her fork and said, "We just want to move forward." I nodded. So do I. My dad cleared his throat. "We've made mistakes." I didn't speak. "We let things spiral," he continued. "We thought we were helping Brandon, but we see now how that hurt you." I finally met his eyes. "Do you?" He hesitated. "We're trying." I leaned back in my chair. "Good. Because here's how we move forward." They both straightened. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for affection. I'm not even asking for a relationship. What I am asking for is distance." My mom's eyes welled up. "Nathan." I held up a hand. "I've rebuilt everything you tried to strip away. I've cleaned up the mess Brandon left behind. And I've done it without rage. Without dragging your names through the mud. Because I still have more respect for this family than you ever had for me." They sat frozen. I stood. "I'll see you on holidays." "Maybe. But I'm done playing the scapegoat. I'm done being the emotional punching bag. From now on, you get access to me based on how you treat me. Not because of blood." My mom wiped her eyes. My dad just stared at his plate. I walked out. No hug. No wave. No thank you for coming. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind me. Quiet. Clean. Final. That was 6 months ago. Since then, my life has been simple. Work is steady. Ledgerlight launched with 3,000 signups in the first month. I hired a small team. Quiet growth, no flash. Just results. The penthouse. Still mine. I upgraded the coffee machine. My parents haven't called. Brandon's social media remains inactive. Word is, he moved out of state. Sometimes people ask me if I regret any of it. If it was too much. If I wish I had just let it go. But here's the truth. I didn't burn the bridge. They did. I just made sure they couldn't rebuild it with stolen wood. And that, my friend, is how I got my peace back. For good. I'm Lucas, 29, and I've always been the responsible one, which is family code for the person we lean on until he snaps. I grew up in a split-level house where the carpet still smelled faintly like old shampoo and lemon cleaner from my mother's weekend rituals, where everything had its place except accountability. My mom, Elena, has a smile that can be mistaken for warmth if you've only met her once. It's a thin-line smile, the kind she fixes under bright kitchen lights while offering second helpings as if hospitality were the same as love. My older brother, Adrian, is 32 and lives his life like it's a group project where he contributes the presentation slides 15 minutes before class, except somebody else writes the slides and pays for the laptop. Dad exists on the edge of things, quieter and gentler than mom, but somehow always out of the room when the real conversations happen. It's not that he doesn't care. I think he learned, years ago, that caring loudly in this house is like standing in front of an ocean wave and expecting it to listen. I moved out 5 years ago, rented a shabby one-bedroom near the river, and worked my way into a steady job doing IT for a mid-sized company where the most dangerous things I handle are passwords taped under keyboards. I learned to save. At first it wasn't much, an emergency fund that looked like a toddler's piggy bank when it cried open. But month by month, I became careful with my spending, almost ritualistic. I picked up side gigs removing malware from desperate laptops, resetting Wi-Fi networks, cleaning up after the digital messes people make when they think pop-ups are friends. No miracles, just discipline. Coffee in, hands on keys, stack the small wins. It was boring in the way that peace tends to be. I didn't mind. Peace is underrated. And after years of living in a household where emotional weather systems came out of nowhere, boring felt like fresh air. The safe came later. I didn't grow up trusting banks because I didn't grow up seeing money stay where it should. You never forget being 7 and watching an aunt cry over a borrowed envelope at Thanksgiving, or hearing the hushed argument through the hallway. Mom's voice steady, accusing, like she was reminding the world that family means shared resources and, conveniently, shared silence. The safe was a dented steel thing I picked up from an estate sale for $60. It wasn't pretty, but it did what I needed. It kept me from making dumb late-night decisions, and it kept other people from doing the same. I bolted it into the floor of my bedroom closet when I upgraded to a better apartment. Inside, I kept a few important documents, a flash drive with backups, and, eventually, the savings that had quietly grown past the number that used to feel impossible. $40,000 isn't life-changing money in the way movies pretend, but it's a shield. It's a deep breath. It's knowing that if your car dies, you don't have to become a problem someone else solves. It's dignity with a barcode. My mother knew I had some money because she'd ask me now and then, casually, about what I was saving for. I learned to answer like a diplomat. Just a cushion, I'd say, or maybe a down payment one day. Those words used to make her eyes go far away, like they were chasing a thought she didn't like. She'd change the subject and bring up Adrian. He was between opportunities, which in our family language meant the last one ended abruptly and the next one hadn't been invented yet. He was always rebranding his own story. A business idea, a marketing gig, a consultant thing for a friend of a friend. If you listened closely, you could hear the way the sentences leaned toward me. He just needs a little runway. You know how it is. I knew how it was. The runway always lived under my feet. A month before everything began to tilt, Adrian called and asked if we could meet for lunch. He picked an airy cafe with exposed brick and plants hanging from macrame, the kind of place that expects you to photograph your sandwich. He wore a crisp shirt he hadn't ironed, the collar curling up a little like it was trying to get away. He grinned like we were both in on the same joke. "You look good, man," he said, drumming his fingers on the table. No one drums their fingers when they're about to say something responsible. He talked about a new project, something about events, something about brand partnerships, something about accelerating growth. The nouns were missing verbs. He wasn't asking for money, he promised. He just wanted advice. I gave the kind of advice you give when you know none of it will land. Write a plan, run honest numbers, talk to someone who doesn't love you. He nodded, earnest as a student taking a test he'd already decided not to grade. When the check came, he stared at me like it was a puzzle. I paid. I told myself it was cheaper than the fight that would follow. My uncle, Mom's brother, Tomas, was different. He's always liked me, probably because I didn't ask him for anything. He runs a small property management company and still does his own bookkeeping on software older than me. We talk occasionally about things like backups and two-factor authentication and why you should never use the same password for your email and your bank. He's not flashy, but he respects the work of building something brick by brick. Last fall, he called with a question I didn't expect. He had an investment fund he kept off the grid of daily business accounts, money that fluctuated with rental turnovers and deposits, and he was tired of tracking it in floppy-era spreadsheets. He wanted a better system, something reliable. We spent a couple Saturdays together setting up a clean structure, a joint ledger separate from his operating accounts, a simple set of controls, and a backup routine that ran like a heartbeat. For legal reasons, the account stayed entirely in his name. The fund was basically a bucket of savings and float, with clean paperwork and separate reporting. I built the reporting templates, the dashboards, the alerts that pinged him if something moved oddly. He liked that. He liked me more for being invisible about it. Quiet competence earns trust in ways speeches never do. A few weeks later, he mentioned how we could incorporate a family reserve feature, his words, not mine. So he'd have a small emergency buffer for loved ones, tightly documented and only with his approval. I set it up exactly like he asked, documented every permission, and went home feeling like the grown-up version of me was real. That was the background music in my life when Mom asked me to stop by on a Saturday. Just for coffee, she said. Her voice had that bright note it gets when she's already decided something and wants to make it sound light. I drove over mid-afternoon, the sun slanting across the street in warm squares. The house looked the same as it always had, a little too polished, a little too full of framed family photos where everyone looks like they know how to smile on command. The front door was already open when I walked up the steps. "Hi, honey," Mom sang, already turning toward the kitchen. She had coffee ready, 2 cups set out, the good mugs with the blue rim we were never allowed to use when we lived there. "Adrian's out running errands," she added, like I'd asked. "Your dad's in the garage, something with the mower." Through the window I could see him, shoulders hunched in the quiet way he exists now, studying a manual, as if inside the pages there were instructions for how to be left alone. We sat. She spooned sugar into her cup and watched it sink, slow and dissolving. She didn't ask about my week. She didn't ask about the new deployment schedule at work or my neighbor's yappy dog. She asked, with practiced casualness, "Do you still have that safe in your apartment?" I felt the air in my chest do a small, private movement. I kept my voice steady. "Yeah. What?" "Oh, just curious," she said, shrugging. "You know how I worry about burglars. People hear things." Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, the way people's eyes do when they're pretending not to look at something they've already seen. And then, without any transition at all, she said, "I've been thinking a lot about family lately. You know how hard it's been for your brother." There it was. The click of the floorboard in an old house. The shift you feel before anything moves. I nodded. I didn't offer to fill the silence. I've learned not to pave roads to my own wallet. She reached across and touched my wrist like we were in a gentle commercial about closeness. "You're such a good son, Lucas. So sensible. Not like me. I'm impulsive, your father says." She laughed. It didn't touch her eyes. "I did something this week I'm not sure you'll understand, not right away. But it was the right thing for this family. For us." I waited. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's car door thunked shut. The clock in the living room clicked through a second that felt longer than the others. She smiled, almost bashful. "I found the keys to your safe." My brain did that thing where a thought arrives like a glass falling off a counter, there and broken at the same time. I didn't respond. She filled the space with that soft voice she uses when she's about to step on your neck. "You left them at our place around Christmas, remember? That little brass key ring? I put it on the hook by the garage and forgot all about it. Saw it the other day and thought, how silly of Lucas to leave something so important. I meant to call you." She took a sip of coffee she didn't need and set the cup down with precise care, a dancer placing a prop. "Anyway, I drove over while you were at work. I know your landlord, you know. Lovely man. He let me in when I told him I was your mother and I needed to check something in your apartment. I brought cookies," she added, like it mattered. For a second, I couldn't figure out which feeling to choose. Anger, obviously. Violation, yes. But something else pressed through. This stunned disbelief at how normal her tone was. The sugar still glowed at the bottom of her cup like sand in shallow water. "I took your 40,000, she said, as if she were saying she'd borrowed a book, "and paid off your brother's debts." It was suffocating him, Lucas. That kind of pressure. You don't know what anxiety can do to a person. He hasn't been sleeping. He's been so stressed, you can see it in his skin. And you, well, you're stable. You'll make it back in no time. You owe the family that much." She tilted her head, and the smile sharpened. "We do for each other. That's what we've always done." Something in me went very still, the way a lake flattens under a sudden wind break. I thought about the safe's weight, the feeling of my hands tightening the bolts, the way the metal had warmed over the years as if it were a living thing. I thought about every night I'd said no to a dinner out. Every weekend, I took an extra shift fixing laptops with coffee cup rings on the lids. I thought about how the money represented a promise I made to myself, back when I was tired of needing permission to feel secure. My mouth tasted like pennies. I didn't say anything at first. She took my silence as agreement. She always has. I'm glad you're not making a scene, she cooed. See? This is why I can count on you. You understand what sacrifice looks like. And you'll see how much better Adrian does now that he can breathe. He'll repay it, of course, once he's on his feet. We're all on the same team. On the same team. I let the words sit. The clock clicked. Somewhere in the garage, Dad's wrench slipped and clattered on concrete. It echoed in the kitchen like another kind of truth. I just nodded and said, "If you say so." The words surprised me, but they fit. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask how she got past the secondary lock on the safe or why she thought any of this was acceptable. I said it the way you acknowledge a forecast you already saw on your phone. Predictable, inevitable, and still annoying enough to ruin your plans. If she heard the quiet in it, she pretended not to. Her smile widened, relieved. "Good," she said. "Good. I knew you'd be mature about it." She stood, smoothed her sweater, and immediately started talking about dinner. "Stay," she said. "I'm making lemon chicken. Your brother said he might swing by later. He'll be so grateful when he hears how understanding you were. This is going to be a turning point for him." I stared at the window over the sink, the one that looks out at the backyard where we used to play catch. I watched two sparrows fuss at the edge of the fence like they were arguing about a map. In that moment, the kitchen felt small and bright and airless, like a stage set. I thought about all the ways I could respond, how each path would invite its own set of consequences. Rage would be satisfying and useless. Pleading would be demeaning and useless. Logic would be elegant and useless. My mother collects guilt like some people collect stamps. She knows every shade and where to press it. So I sat there and let the quiet do what it does. Make space for a next step that didn't look like a tantrum. That was when the front door opened without a knock. It was Uncle Tomas, hat in hand, looking the way he always looks, like a man who knows where every tool is in a garage and can fix anything except the people who live above it. "Elena," he called, stepping into the living room before he saw me. "Do you have a minute?" I was nearby and wanted to ask. He stopped in the doorway when he recognized me. His face brightened. "Lucas." "Hey, kiddo." Mom's posture shifted. She doesn't like surprise visits. They don't fit on the schedule she keeps in her head. "Tomas," she said, voice light again. "What a pleasant surprise." He held up an envelope and tapped it against his palm. "Quick thing," he said. "I'm reconciling the float accounts for the rentals and the family reserve bucket you helped me set up, remember? Just wanted to ask a simple question. Where's the investment fund I trusted you with?" Time stretched. The question hung there like a picture frame that hadn't been nailed properly. I watched the change in my mother's face. How the color left it, slowly at first, and then all at once, the way a tide recedes. She looked at him, then at me, and I could see her scanning possibilities like a chess player 6 moves deep and still losing. She opened and closed her mouth. Her smile returned, weaker, as if it didn't fit anymore. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to laugh. "I don't have any of your funds, Tomas." "What are you talking about?" Tomas frowned. "The family reserve feature, remember? We talked about limiting access. Last week I saw movements, maybe. Just making sure everything's tidy. It's probably nothing. But you said you wanted transparency. We agreed on it." I leaned forward, elbows on the table, and felt the world click into a place that finally made sense. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I just leaned in, close enough that my mother could see exactly how calm I was, and I whispered 3 words, quiet as falling snow, clear as glass. "Check the logs." I watched him blink, then nod, confusion turning into a thin, focused line across his brow. He slid his phone from his pocket with the unconscious grace of someone pulling a familiar tool from a belt, opened the app we had set up together, and scrolled. His mouth tightened. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. He pressed a contact and lifted the phone to his ear. "Hi," he said, voice formal in the way good men's voices get when they need it to be. "It's Tomas. I need a favor. Could you come by the house?" "Yes, now. Bring the file." Mom stood very still. "Tomas," she said, that brittle laugh sharpening. "Honestly, this is silly. You know me. I wouldn't touch your business." He didn't look at her. He looked at me. The look said everything we didn't want to say in front of her. It said, "Are you okay?" It said, "I'm sorry." It said, "Let me handle this part." 10 minutes later, headlights washed over the living room wall. The car eased into the driveway like it already knew where to park. I could make out the silhouette of a man stepping out, tall, carrying a briefcase. My mother's hand found the back of a dining chair and held it like it was the last solid thing in the room. I didn't move. I just watched the light crawl across the ceiling and thought about that safe, about the idea of a safe, about the child I used to be who counted quarters and thought that adults were the ones who knew how to leave things where they belonged. The front doorknob turned. The house took a breath. And that was the exact second I understood that the line I'd drawn in my head, the quiet boundary I kept for years, had been crossed in a way there wasn't going back from. When the man with the briefcase stepped inside, the air in the living room felt so heavy I swear you could have cut it with a butter knife. My uncle greeted him quietly, with the clipped, formal tone of someone who was already halfway past politeness. My mom didn't even glance at the man. She was too busy staring at me, eyes sharp and calculating, like if she could just figure out which words would shut me down, this whole moment would dissolve. That's when the shift really began. She wasn't just annoyed at being caught. She was angry at me for letting Tomas find out. "Lucas," she hissed through her teeth, her smile glued on for the other men in the room. "You've always had a way of twisting things. You know your uncle is sensitive about his accounts. You're going to give him the wrong impression if you keep playing this little game." There it was, the pivot. It wasn't about what she'd done, it was about me. Somehow, her walking into my apartment, breaking into my safe, and draining $40,000 became a story about how I was manipulative, how I was making her look bad. It was so absurd I almost laughed, but I didn't. I'd been here before, just never with stakes this high. My uncle looked between us, his face tightening. "Elena," he said slowly, "this isn't about impressions. Money moved that shouldn't have. The logs are clear." But Mom just raised her eyebrows, like she was disappointed in him too. "Tomas, you've always trusted Lucas too much. He's clever, yes, but he doesn't always see the big picture. He holds grudges. He doesn't understand family sacrifices the way we do." She pressed her hand flat against the table as if to steady herself, and her eyes flicked to me again, sharper this time. "Tell him, Lucas. Tell him you exaggerated." It was surreal, hearing her try to twist the truth right in front of the man who had literally just seen the records with his own eyes. But it was her pattern. When cornered, she didn't apologize, she rewrote the story. She made herself the martyr, the rest of us the ungrateful ones. And as if on cue, Adrian walked in, jingling his car keys like he was announcing himself to the world. He was all smiles, oblivious to the tension in the room. "Hey, family," he said, kicking off his shoes by the door. "Mom, that chicken smells amazing." He gave me a quick nod before his eyes landed on the briefcase man, then my uncle, then Mom's tight smile. What's going on?" Mom's face softened instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. She opened her arms. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just family talk. Come here." And he did. He always did, letting her hug him like he was still the little boy who scraped his knees on the driveway. Then she said it. Right there, in front of everyone, she said it. "Your brother's being dramatic again. He doesn't understand why I had to step in and save you. But he'll come around. He always does. He's just stubborn." I felt my chest tighten. Not only had she stolen from me, she was now framing it as heroism and painting me as the unreasonable one. And Adrian, God, Adrian. He just smiled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, man, I didn't ask her to. She just wanted to help. You know how she is." That was it. The shift from victim to villain, handed to me like an unwanted coat I'd have to wear. My uncle's jaw clenched, but he stayed quiet, waiting for more. The man with the briefcase started pulling papers from his folder, the rustle of documents loud in the silence. Mom's eyes darted nervously, but she didn't back down. She never does. "Lucas," she said again, quieter this time, but sharper. "Family looks after family. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. She'd taken something from me, yes, but what she really wanted was for me to accept her version of the story. To nod along like I had all those other times, when the stakes were smaller, when the harm could be shrugged off. This time, though, she had dragged my uncle into it. She had crossed into a territory she couldn't charm her way out of so easily. And as Adrian sat there, confused but already leaning toward her side, and as Tomas kept glancing between us like he was bracing for an earthquake, I knew exactly what was happening. The favoritism, the manipulation, the endless excuses for Adrian. It wasn't a bug in the system. It was the system, and if I didn't play carefully, I'd end up crushed under it again. That was the moment I stopped feeling shocked and started planning. Adrian sank into the armchair like it was his throne, completely oblivious to how raw the room had become. He propped one ankle over his knee, leaned back, and gave me that lopsided grin he'd been using since we were kids whenever Mom swooped in to shield him. "Hey, don't be mad at Mom," he said, as if he were comforting me. "She's just trying to keep us all afloat. You've always been the saver. I've always been the spender. It balances out, right?" The casualness of it hit me like a shove. Balances out. $40,000 gone. Years of sacrifice dismissed as some natural symmetry between his recklessness and my caution. I studied his face, looking for any trace of guilt, but all I saw was the same entitled comfort he'd always carried, the same belief that family would bend around his mistakes until they broke. Uncle Tomas cleared his throat, shuffling the papers the man with the briefcase had handed him. "This isn't a balance issue," he said, his voice clipped. "This is theft. Plain and simple." His eyes flicked to Adrian, then back to Mom. "I trusted the system we set up. If funds were touched without my knowledge." Mom cut him off with a sharp laugh, the kind that sounds like it's meant for an audience. "Theft? Tomas, please. Don't dramatize. This is family. We don't nickel and dime each other." But then she made her move, the betrayal that shifted everything from uneasy tension to something colder. She stood, walked over to Tomas, and placed a hand on his arm. "You know me," she said sweetly. "You know I'd never do anything to hurt you." "But Lucas," her eyes turned on me like knives, "he's been bitter. He never forgave us for helping Adrian through college. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's been adjusting things in your accounts to make me look bad." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. My mother had just accused me, in front of Tomas and an outside witness, of embezzling from his investment fund. Not only had she stolen my savings, she was now setting me up as the fall guy for her own theft. Tomas froze, his jaw tightening. "Elena," he said slowly, "are you suggesting your son manipulated the logs I've been reviewing?" She leaned in closer to him, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she'd used my entire life to turn one relative against another. "He's always been good with computers. Too good. You know how clever he is. And when he feels slighted, well, he can hold on to resentment." I felt the floor drop out from under me. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. Wasn't just covering for Adrian. This was my own mother trying to destroy the trust I'd built with the one relative who believed in me. And for what? To keep Adrian comfortable? To keep herself from being exposed? Adrian shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mom, come on, that's a bit much." Lucas wouldn't. He stopped when she shot him a look, the same look that had silenced him his entire life. He looked down, rubbed the back of his neck again, and muttered, "Well, I mean, he does know how to, code stuff. I don't really get it." The betrayal cut deeper because it wasn't just her words. It was the way Adrian let them hang in the air, unchallenged, letting me twist under suspicion. The man with the briefcase spoke up finally, his voice firm. "For the record, Mrs. Elena, the logs cannot be manipulated from outside the secured system. Every action is time-stamped, and we have redundant copies. Your son didn't tamper with anything, but the damage was already done." My uncle's eyes had clouded with doubt. My brother sat quietly, letting the suggestion linger. And my mother, she sat back down, satisfied, sipping her coffee like she hadn't just tried to rewrite the entire narrative of my life in front of the only people who could expose her. That was the moment something broke in me. The trust one had kept alive, fragile and stubborn, finally snapped. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't even about Adrian. It was about my mother, looking me in the eye and deciding that protecting her favorite child and her own image was worth sacrificing me completely. I sat there, calm on the outside, but inside I was already rewriting the rules. This wasn't about surviving her manipulation anymore. It was about ending it. The ride home that night was the longest drive of my life. I kept both hands tight on the steering wheel, watching the streetlights flash across the windshield like they were mocking me. I couldn't hear the radio over the noise in my head. Every word replayed. Mom's smirk when she said she saved Adrian. The way she leaned on Tomas and tried to paint me as the manipulator. Adrian sitting in that armchair and letting it all happen. My throat was dry, but my palms were slick with sweat. I remember thinking, so this is it. This is what betrayal feels like when it's not just a punchline in a family argument, but a knife slipped between your ribs by the very people who raised you. When I got back to my apartment, I walked straight to the closet. The safe was still there, bolted down, heavier than it looked. I knelt down and turned the handle even though I already knew what I'd find: emptiness. The inside smelled faintly of steel and paper. The documents were still there, neat and untouched, but the envelope was gone, along with the years I'd spent building it. I sat on the floor, my back against the closet door, and just let the weight of it press down on me. It wasn't the money alone, it was the meaning of it. Every dollar in that envelope represented something I had denied myself. The nights I said no to drinks with coworkers because I couldn't justify the tab. The weekends I spent hunched over strangers' laptops instead of out with friends. The vacations I never took, the upgrades I never bought. I had built it slowly, carefully, brick by brick, because I needed proof that I could rely on myself when no one else was reliable. And in one sweep, my mother had reached into my life and taken it, as if it were just another one of her kitchen cabinets to rearrange. For 2 days, I couldn't eat properly. I went through the motions at work, but every time I looked at my screen, I saw her smile instead. Every time someone asked me a question, I heard her voice accusing me of tampering with Tomas's accounts. Sleep came in short bursts, restless, filled with images of Adrian laughing in that armchair, while Tomas's doubt-filled eyes landed on me. I didn't cry, though. I couldn't. The anger had scorched every tear before it could fall. The worst part was the silence. Mom didn't call. Adrian didn't text. Even Dad, who usually at least checked in with a half-hearted "how's work" email, stayed quiet. It was like I'd been cut out of the script, as though I had been cast as the villain in their family play, and the best way to deal with me was to erase me altogether. And for a while, I let myself believe it. I dragged myself through the days with the dull ache of someone who realizes the ground under him was never solid to begin with. But somewhere in that silence, something shifted. On the third night, sitting alone in my kitchen with the hum of the refrigerator as my only company, I realized I wasn't entirely powerless. Yes, she had taken my savings. Yes, she had tried to smear me in front of Tomas. But in her arrogance, she had also revealed something. She thought she still held control, that I would swallow this betrayal the way I had swallowed all the smaller ones. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like swallowing anything. So I started small. I pulled out my laptop, opened the encrypted backups I'd kept of Tomas's system, and reviewed the logs. Every access was time-stamped, every withdrawal tracked with precision. I wasn't looking for confirmation. I already knew she'd touched it. I was looking for patterns, for proof that could stand on its own legs when words wouldn't. And as I read through the entries, seeing her fingerprints all over them, I felt a strange calm settle in my chest. The plan wasn't fully formed yet. All I knew was that this wasn't going to end with me sitting silently on my apartment floor while she rewrote history. Not this time. Still, the days that followed were hard. I forced myself through work, plastering on a neutral face while inside I was unraveling and restitching myself at the same time. My coworkers noticed I was quieter, but no one asked. I went home each night to the same hollow apartment, cooked the same bland meals, and sat staring at the empty safe as if it might suddenly give me answers. That was my rock bottom, realizing that the people who were supposed to protect me were the ones who had gutted me, and that the only way forward was to stop expecting them to change. I couldn't fix them. I couldn't beg for fairness from a system built on favoritism and manipulation. The only choice I had left was to turn their own weight against them. And for the first time, sitting there in the glow of my computer screen, I actually started to believe I could. The first signs of change were subtle. A coworker dropped by my desk one Monday morning with a problem no one else had been able to fix. Her tone was apologetic, like she was burdening me, but 15 minutes later, I had her system humming like new. She blinked at me, surprised. "You're wasted here," she said, half joking. "You should be running this place." Her words stuck with me. For years, I had been the quiet fixer, the one who solved problems behind the scenes while others collected the credit. It was comfortable, invisible, safe. But after what had happened with my mother, the idea of invisibility no longer felt like safety. It felt like surrender. So when an internal job posting came up for a senior systems role, I applied. Not because I thought I would get it, but because I needed to do something that proved I wasn't going to keep playing small. 2 weeks later, I was in a glass-walled office, sitting across from a manager who asked sharp questions. Instead of hedging, I answered plainly. I spoke about the systems I'd built for Tomas, the backups, the alerts. I didn't mention my mother. I didn't mention betrayal. I framed it as proof that I could build structures that kept people accountable. The manager nodded, scribbled notes, asked for details, and for the first time I realized I wasn't just the kid who's good with computers. I was someone with control, someone whose skills had weight. When the offer came through, higher pay, better benefits, more autonomy, I felt something inside me click back into place. The number on the contract didn't erase the empty safe in my apartment, but it reminded me I could rebuild faster this time, smarter this time. With the raise came a shift in my habits. I stopped turning down invitations. I let myself accept a drink after work. I bought a better chair for my apartment instead of another bargain bin one that wobbled. I signed up for a class I'd been putting off, not because I needed it, but because I wanted it. Each choice was small, but together they stitched a new rhythm into my life. And as my own life brightened, I noticed the cracks widening in the family facade. Adrian called one night, his voice restless. "Hey, man, I know things are tense, but I could use a little help. Just until I get this new gig going." I listened without interrupting, the way I always used to. But this time, when he finished, I said, "I'm not your safety net anymore." Silence stretched on the line. He tried to laugh it off, but I didn't budge. When I hung up, I realized my hands weren't even shaking. Tomas, meanwhile, began reaching out more often, not with suspicion, but with trust. He invited me to help him modernize more of his systems. What had started as a side favor grew into a consulting arrangement. He insisted on paying me, and the checks, though modest, were steady. "Better me giving this to you than wasting it on some firm that doesn't care," he said. His trust was a lifeline. It reminded me that my mother's attempt to poison that bond had failed. By spring, my apartment no longer felt hollow. The safe was still there, but I stopped staring at its emptiness like it was a wound. Instead, I focused on filling new accounts, clean and separate, ones no one else knew about. My savings ticked upward again, faster now with my new role and consulting work. It wasn't just money, it was momentum. And with momentum came confidence. I stopped lowering my voice when talking about my job around family. I let Tomas brag about my work when relatives gathered. Mom would tighten her smile, but she never corrected him. Adrian would shift uncomfortably, but he didn't challenge it. And Dad? Well, Dad still mostly stayed quiet, but one evening after dinner he pulled me aside and muttered, "I'm proud of you." It wasn't much, but from him, it was seismic. Yet even in this rise, I knew the story wasn't finished. My mother had taken something from me that couldn't be returned, and she had tried to bury me under her lies. I wasn't naive enough to think she'd stop just because I was rebuilding. No, if anything, her grip would tighten when she realized I was slipping out of it. And that, strangely, gave me clarity. The higher I climbed, the clearer I saw the landscape. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to her moves. I was preparing my own. Momentum has a way of opening doors you never even noticed before. By the time summer rolled around, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was gathering leverage, piece by piece, almost without realizing it at first. My new role at work had me managing not just systems, but compliance checks. That meant I had access to audit tools, reporting frameworks, and the kind of quiet power most people ignore because it hides in spreadsheets. The same instincts that once made me cautious about my own savings now made me sharp in recognizing patterns, trails, and loopholes. It was during one of those late nights at the office, fluorescent lights buzzing, the building nearly empty, that I stumbled on the thought that changed everything. People like my mother never assume the system will hold them accountable. They rely on secrecy, on silence, on the family code of don't air dirty laundry. But I was now sitting on skills and access that could pierce through that shield. I didn't need to yell. I just needed to document. Around that same time, Tomas called me into his office. He had a stack of ledgers on his desk and a weary look in his eyes. "I want you to formalize what we've been doing," he said. "Not just backups. I want a full compliance trail. If anyone ever questions me, I need to show I've kept everything clean." He leaned back, sighing. "You've got the mind for this, Lucas. I trust you more than anyone else in the family." His words landed heavier than he realized. Trust, Real trust, not the lip service kind, was a currency I hadn't held in years. And with it came responsibility. I nodded, already sketching the framework in my head. I can build you something bulletproof, I said. By the end of the month, Tomas's family reserve system wasn't just a side project anymore. It was airtight, multi-layered access, rolling backups, and automated anomaly detection that flagged any odd movement. It logged who, when, and how. Nothing could slip through unnoticed now. And in building it, I realized something. I'd created a mirror of the very thing my mother had violated in me. Only this time, it wasn't a dented steel safe in an apartment closet. This was a fortress she couldn't charm or guilt her way into. Then came the moment of pure accident, or maybe fate. While cleaning up some alerts one evening, I traced back a small irregularity that had gone unaddressed from the earlier chaos. It wasn't large, just a fraction of what Mom had stolen from me. But the log was clear. The access came from her, through Tomas's family reserve account. My stomach tightened as I realized I was staring at proof. Proof she had siphoned money not just from me, but from her own brother's system. Proof she couldn't argue away with a smile. And suddenly, I saw the shape of something bigger. It wasn't enough to rebuild myself. It wasn't enough to say no to Adrian's calls. The real power was in letting her hoist herself with her own rope. She believed the family script so fully. Lucas is responsible, Adrian needs protecting, Elena makes the sacrifices, that she never considered someone might be writing a different story behind her back. From that point on, I became deliberate. Every conversation with her, I let play out while I kept mental notes. Every time Adrian tried to pull me back into his orbit, I recorded just how deep his dependence ran. And every time Tomas asked me to update his system, I added one more layer of clarity, one more safeguard that pointed all arrows exactly where they needed to point if things ever came to light. Meanwhile, my professional world was expanding. The consulting I did for Tomas turned into referrals, other small business owners who needed reliable systems. At first, I hesitated, not wanting to overextend, but I realized something. The more I grew outside the family, the less I needed their approval. Independence itself was leverage. Money was part of it, yes, but reputation, that was the true fortress. It dawned on me then. Revenge wasn't going to be about shouting her down at a dinner table or storming out in anger. It was going to be quiet, methodical, undeniable. She had built her entire identity on being the one in control, the one pulling strings. And now, for the first time, the strings weren't in her hands anymore. I didn't have every detail yet, but I had the position. I had the skills. And, most importantly, I had the proof. All that was left was waiting for the right moment, because I knew, sooner or later, she would give me one. She always did. The moment came on a rainy Sunday in late September. I hadn't planned it for that day, at least not consciously, but life has a way of handing you the exact stage you need when the script is already written. Mom had called earlier in the week, her voice syrupy sweet, inviting me to a family dinner, just like old times. I almost declined, but something in her tone told me it wasn't just dinner. It was a performance. And if she wanted an audience, well, I was ready to play my part. When I arrived, the table was set like it was Thanksgiving. Linen tablecloth, the good, plates, candles flickering even though it was still daylight. Adrian was already there, sprawled in his seat with a glass of wine he hadn't poured himself. Dad sat at the far end, quiet as ever, fiddling with his fork. Tomas was there too, which immediately told me Mom had orchestrated this as some kind of show of unity. "Lucas," Mom sang, her smile wide, arms outstretched like she was welcoming a prodigal son. "I'm so glad you made it. Sit, sit." I sat. The food was passed around, conversation light at first. Adrian bragged about a new opportunity, vague as always, while Mom nodded proudly. Then, right on cue, she turned to me. "You know," she said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, "I've been thinking a lot about how families weather storms. Adrian is finally getting back on track, thanks to all of us pulling together." Her eyes flicked to me like knives hidden in silk. Even if some of us don't always appreciate the sacrifices others make. There it was, the setup. She was going to spin her theft as family heroism again, in front of Tomas, in front of Dad, with Adrian as her proof of success. I felt the familiar anger rise, but this time I didn't let it show. I just smiled faintly and sipped my water. "Tomas," she continued, "I'm sure you understand." Sometimes we have to move resources around for the greater good. I've always believed in taking care of each other, even if certain people, her eyes landed on me again, would rather hoard than help. The audacity of it might have floored me once. But not now. Not with what I had. I leaned back in my chair, calm, deliberate. That's an interesting philosophy, Mom. Speaking of taking care of each other, have you checked your logs lately, Tomas? The room stilled. Tomas frowned. Logs. I reached into my bag and placed a slim folder on the table. I'd printed everything. The timestamps, the access records, the transfers. Neat, undeniable. Yes, I said evenly. The ones we set up for your reserve accounts. I brought a copy, just in case. Adrian shifted uncomfortably, looking from me to Mom. She laughed, too quickly. Oh, Lucas, honestly. Always dramatizing. What are you trying to prove? Nothing, I said. I don't need to prove anything. The records speak for themselves. I slid the folder toward Tomas. Every access, every transfer. You'll notice some familiar fingerprints. Tomas opened it, scanning quickly, his face darkening as he read. The room filled with the quiet sound of paper rustling, the weight of silence pressing down harder with each page. Finally, he looked up, his eyes hard on my mother. Elena, he said, his voice low and sharp, you told me Lucas was tampering. But these are your entries, your credentials, your actions. Her smile faltered, then snapped back on like brittle glass. That's ridiculous. He must have. He's clever with computers. Tomas, you know that. He could have. But Tomas cut her off. Don't. The system has redundancies. He couldn't fake these if he tried. You lied to me. You lied about him. He pushed the folder back across the table with disgust. Adrian set down his wine glass, his face pale. Mom, is this true? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For once, the performance had no lines left. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat there, steady and calm, the way she never expected me to be. You wanted to talk about sacrifices, I said quietly. Here's the truth. I built my own life from the ground up. I worked for what I had. And when you stole it, you tried to destroy my reputation to cover your tracks. You can spin whatever story you want, but the facts don't bend for you anymore. Tomas shoved back his chair and stood. I can't believe this, he muttered, shaking his head. All these years, Elena, and you'd sink this low. He turned to me. I'll handle this. But you, he paused, his voice softening. You've done more for this family than anyone gives you credit for. Don't let her take that from you again. Mom reached for him, her voice rising, but he pulled his arm away. Dad finally looked up from his fork, his eyes wide with something between shock and shame. Adrian sat frozen, as if the reality had finally crashed through his comfortable haze. And me? I just folded my hands in my lap, steady as stone, and watched the empire of manipulation she had built over decades start to crumble in front of her. That was the revenge, not shouting her down, not storming out, but letting the truth speak louder than she ever could. The fallout came faster than I expected. Tomas didn't storm out right then. He stayed long enough to make his position clear. This isn't just between you and Lucas, Elena, he said, standing with the folder still in his hand. You tampered with my accounts. That's not family business. That's fraud. I could take this to the authorities tomorrow, and you'd have no defense. Mom's face drained of color. She tried to stand, to reach for him again, but he stepped back. Don't. He snapped, sharper than I'd ever heard from him. You've burned enough bridges. Don't think you can charm your way out of this one. Adrian looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. His usual swagger evaporated. Wait, he stammered. So the debts, the money Mom used. Yes, I said, my voice steady. The car you drive, the rent you didn't pay, the tabs you ran up. She covered it with my savings, and then she dipped into Tomas's reserve to hide the trail. She didn't just rescue you, Adrian. She made me pay for it. Twice. He blinked, his mouth opening and closing, no words coming out. Finally, he slumped back into his chair, his eyes fixed on the table. For once, he had nothing to say. Dad, who had been silent all night, finally spoke. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in years. Elena, he said, shaking his head, I can't believe you'd do this. To him. To Tomas. His hands trembled as he set down his fork. You've dragged this family through enough. I won't defend you this time. The room seemed to shrink as the words sank in. For decades, Dad had played the quiet bystander, the man who looked away to keep the peace. But this time, he wasn't looking away. He was looking right at her. Tomas tucked the folder under his arm. "I'll be in touch," he said coldly. "We'll settle this properly. And if you try to spin this against Lucas again, I won't hesitate to make every page of this file public." He glanced at me, gave a short nod, and walked out into the rain. Mom crumpled into her chair, her perfect composure cracking. "I did it for the family," she whispered, as if repeating it might make it true. But no one answered. I stood slowly, my chair scraping back. I looked at Adrian, still pale and silent. At Dad, who sat rigid but unflinching. At Mom, who couldn't meet my eyes anymore. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. "You taught me one thing, Mom," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the silence. "Family doesn't mean sacrifice. It means trust. And the day you broke that, you stopped being my safe." I turned and walked out into the night, the rain cool against my skin. Behind me, the house that had always felt like a stage was finally collapsing in on itself. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet, responsible one holding everything together. I was the one who walked away, and I didn't look back. I'm Miles, 36 years old, single dad, and the proud father of a 12-year-old named Owen. My entire world wrapped up in a lanky frame, a mop of wild hair, and a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. I used to think family was everything. I grew up believing that. I carried it with me like a badge of honor through every storm life threw my way. But it took a busted skateboard and a hospital waiting room to finally open my eyes to something I had spent way too long denying. My relationship with my parents had always been complicated. Not explosive, not dramatic, just quietly lopsided. I was the independent one, the strong one, the "you'll figure it out" child. Which sounds like a compliment until you realize it means we're not going to help you. My younger brother, Zach, 2 years my junior, was the golden boy. Charming, outgoing, always the center of attention at every family gathering. He had this uncanny ability to fail upward, and no matter what mess he got himself into, my parents always showed up with a mop and a smile. Meanwhile, I was expected to bring my own towel, clean up my own disaster, and make sure I didn't inconvenience anyone while I was at it. It wasn't always terrible. I don't want to paint a false picture. There were birthdays, holidays, laughs around the dinner table. But if you looked closely, if you really paid attention, you could see the cracks. Like how Mom always remembered Zach's favorite dessert and forgot I was allergic to almonds. Or how Dad would drone on about Zach's latest business idea, none of which ever made $1, but would change the subject when I tried to talk about my graphic design business, the one that's actually paid my bills for the last 6 years. When Owen came along, things shifted even more. I was 24, fresh out of a messy breakup with his mom, and suddenly a full-time parent. I thought that might be the thing to bring the family closer. I thought becoming a dad would earn me some points, some recognition, maybe even a little support. But aside from the occasional birthday card or generic toy at Christmas, Owen was mostly an afterthought to them. They said all the right things. "You're doing such a good job. Owen's lucky to have you." But when I needed babysitting or help during a busy work week, there was always a reason they couldn't. Too tired. Too busy. Doctor's appointments. Zach needed help moving again. There was always something. Still, I didn't complain. I couldn't afford to. Emotionally or practically. I kept my head down, worked hard, and raised my boy. We weren't rolling in money, but I built a good life. Simple. Stable. Just us two against the world. And then 3 weeks ago, everything tilted. It was a Saturday afternoon, warm and bright, the kind of day that begs for parks and popsicles. Owen was out with some neighborhood kids, practicing tricks on his new skateboard. He'd just learned how to ollie and had been obsessed with nailing it off the curb. I was inside, cleaning up after lunch, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, and I almost let it go to voicemail. But something told me to answer. "Mr. Dawson?" the voice asked. "This is Dr. Stevens at St. Joseph's ER. Your son Owen was in an accident at the skate park. He's conscious, but has a broken arm and possibly a concussion. We need you to come down right away." I don't even remember driving there. Just the feeling of my chest tightening and my hands shaking as I grabbed my keys and sprinted to the car. When I got to the ER, Owen was awake but pale, hooked up to monitors, arm bent in a way that made my stomach turn. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey, Dad, I messed up. The doctor said he tried to jump the stairs, hit the edge wrong, and fell backward hard. He was lucky he hadn't hit his spine. The concussion wasn't severe, but they wanted to keep him for observation. I stayed by his side the entire time, held his good hand while he slept, read to him from his favorite comic book when he woke up, talked to the nurses, asked questions I barely understood the answers to. I canceled work, rescheduled clients, lived on hospital coffee and vending machine granola bars. For 3 days, it was just me and him. No one came. Not once. No call from mom. No text from dad. No drop-in from Zach. I get that people are busy, but this wasn't a stubbed toe or a stomach bug. This was the ER. This was their grandson, their nephew, their family, and they didn't show up. On the second night, when Owen finally dozed off after throwing up from the meds, I sat in the dark, just staring at the ceiling. Part of me wanted to cry, but I didn't even have the energy. I kept thinking, maybe they didn't know how bad it was. Maybe they thought I had it under control. Maybe they didn't want to crowd us. Excuses. I kept making excuses for them, like I always had. By the time we were discharged on the third day, I was emotionally drained. Owen had a cast and a follow-up scheduled. I carried his backpack, held his hand while he limped to the car, and drove him home like I was carrying glass. The next morning, I got a text from Dad. "Morning, Miles. Hope everything's okay. Listen, your brother needs help covering some wedding costs. He's a little short this month. We were thinking you could pitch in, maybe $5,000? You're always so responsible with money. Let us know." I stared at the message for a full minute, rereading it just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. "No, how's Owen? No, sorry we couldn't make it. No, do you need anything? Just, Zach needs money." It wasn't even surprising anymore. That was the worst part. The betrayal didn't feel like a knife. It felt like gravity. Heavy, unavoidable, always pulling the same direction. I didn't respond right away. I needed a night to sleep on it. Or stew in it, really. I sat on the edge of Owen's bed that evening, watching him sleep, tracing the bandage across his forehead with my eyes. And I thought about every time I'd held my tongue. Every time I said, "It's fine." Every time I swallowed the bitterness and told myself to be the bigger person. The next morning, I logged into my bank account, sent $1 to Dad, and added a note. "For Zach's wedding. Get him socks." Then I put my phone on silent, made Owen breakfast, and took the day off work to stay home with him. We watched movies, built Lego sets, and ordered greasy takeout. It was the best day I'd had in months. Until the phone rang. It was Mom, and she was furious. Her voice hit me like a slap before I even said hello. "Miles, what on earth is wrong with you?" I paused, staring at the caller ID like it had betrayed me. I hadn't spoken to Mom in almost 2 weeks, not since Owen's accident. Not a word, not a "how's he doing," not even a thumbs up emoji. But now, suddenly, here she was, calling with the urgency of a house on fire. And judging by her tone, I was the arsonist. "Hi, Mom," I said flatly. "Nice to hear from you." "Don't get smart with me," she snapped. "What is this little stunt with the dollar? A joke? Are you trying to humiliate your brother before his wedding?" I leaned back in my chair, phone pressed loosely to my ear. Owen was on the couch, giggling at some goofy cartoon. His laugh gave me just enough patience to keep my own voice even. I sent exactly what I thought he deserved. I said, "You guys didn't show up at the hospital. You didn't even call. But the first text I get is asking for money for Zach's wedding. Not Owen. Not me. Zach." There was a sharp exhale on the other end. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Miles. We didn't know how serious it was. Your father told me Owen had a fall, but you said he was fine. You didn't ask for help. I didn't know I had to ask for family to care when my son is in the ER." Silence. A heavy, uncomfortable silence, like a stone dropping into a still lake. Then came the deflection. "Well, that's not the point. The point is, your brother is getting married, and we're all pulling together to make it special. Zach's under a lot of stress, and this was your chance to step up for once and show some support." "Step up? For once?" I laughed, just one dry, bitter chuckle. "You mean like all those times I stepped up for Owen? Alone? While you guys were too busy helping Zach move for the 4th time this year? You're being dramatic." There it was. My mother's go-to shutdown whenever I dared to show emotion. I was dramatic. As a kid, it meant I was being sensitive. As an adult, it meant I was inconvenient. "You know what, Mom? I gotta go. Owen's awake. You remember Owen, right? Your grandson." I hung up without waiting for a reply. That should have been the end of it. But of course it wasn't. 2 days later, I got a group text. Family group. MOM. Just a reminder that Zach and Emily's wedding is in 6 weeks. We're doing a potluck-style rehearsal dinner on Friday night before the big day. Miles, can you bring your lasagna? Zach loves it. Also, we'll need you to help with parking on the day. Thanks in advance. My eyes scanned the message again and again, looking for something, anything, that resembled acknowledgement. A nod to Owen. A footnote of concern. Nothing. I didn't respond. I just deleted the thread. But the hits kept coming. Later that week, Dad called. Calm voice. Reasonable tone. Playing the diplomat, as always. Hey bud, he said. Wanted to talk man-to-man. I know there's been some tension lately. I said nothing. I get it. You're juggling a lot. Owen's accident scared us too, even if we didn't say much. Your mom. Well, you know how she is. And your brother. He's not always great at showing appreciation, but this wedding is a huge deal for him. Emily's family is helping out a lot, and it'd mean the world if we all pitched in. There was a long pause on my end. Then, why do you only call me when you want something? That's not fair, he said quickly. We care about you and Owen. No, you care about Zach. You tolerate me. And you ignore my kid. His voice tightened. Now hold on. No, you hold on. He was in the hospital, Dad. 3 days. Not a call, not a visit, not even a get-well card. And now you want me to play chauffeur and cater for Zach's big day? The same Zach who called Owen a brat at Thanksgiving when he spilled soda on his sneakers. That was an accident. It was Thanksgiving dinner. And Zach made him cry. You told me to stop making a scene. Dad didn't speak for a few seconds. Then he sighed. Look, I'm not saying everything's perfect. But family sticks together, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Then maybe it's time you started acting like I'm part of this family. I hung up again. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd take the hint. But instead, they did what they always did, pretended everything was fine, and steamrolled ahead. Mom began texting me links to tux rental shops. Zach wants navy blue for the groomsmen, she chirped in one message. You'll look so handsome. Then came the wedding registry. Expensive items, dozens of them. Fancy appliances, custom dishware, a $600 vacuum cleaner. I stared at the list like it was written in another language. I was still paying off Owen's ER bill. And now I was expected to buy Zach a state-of-the-art espresso machine? Owen, bless his heart, was too young to fully understand the emotional tug-of-war I was stuck in. But even he noticed. Dad, he asked one night while I was helping him brush his teeth, how come Grandma didn't visit me? I froze, toothbrush in hand. That question hit harder than any of Mom's guilt trips or Dad's lectures. I don't know, buddy, I said softly. Maybe they were busy. He looked up at me, wide-eyed, vulnerable in a way that cracked me open. But I was really hurt. I know, I whispered. I know you were. I went to bed that night, filled with a kind of cold resolve I hadn't felt in years. Over the next couple weeks, Mom doubled down. She sent out a formal invite to a small family brunch 2 weeks before the wedding. Just 6 of us. Me, Mom, Dad, Zach, Emily, and Emily's mom. I wasn't asked. I was assigned to bring drinks and pastries. Owen wasn't invited at all. That's when it started to feel personal. Deliberate. I'd always been on the sidelines of my own family, but now they were drawing a line in the sand. And they were putting my kid on the wrong side of it. I debated confronting them again, but what was the point? They didn't listen. They never had. Every conversation ended with them either gaslighting me or brushing it off with that infuriating phrase. It's not that deep. But it was that deep. It had always been. The worst came the following Saturday. Owen and I were at the grocery store, picking out cereal and snacks. He still had a bit of a limp from the fall, and people occasionally gave us sympathetic looks. I didn't mind. Let them assume what they wanted. As we rounded the corner into the frozen foods aisle, we ran into Zach. Of course. He looked surprised to see me. Then his eyes flicked to Owen. Yo, he said. Little man still limping? I stared at him. No greeting. No warmth. Just that smug smirk he always wore when he thought he was being funny. Yeah, I said. You'd know more if you'd bothered to show up at the hospital. Zach rolled his eyes. Dude, I was in the middle of planning a wedding. You think I've got time to babysit every time someone takes a spill? Owen flinched. I felt my hands clench into fists. It wasn't a spill, I said quietly. It was a concussion, and a broken arm, and 3 days in a hospital bed. Relax, man, Zach said, laughing like I was being ridiculous. He's fine now, right? Kids bounce back. I stepped closer, voice low. You don't get to dismiss what he went through. or what I went through. You weren't there. You never are. Zach just shrugged. Well, maybe if you weren't so high-strung all the time, people would want to be around you. I didn't say another word. I just took Owen's hand and walked away. But in my chest, something shifted. A fuse, maybe. Something small and old and long forgotten finally snapped. And I started to plan. Not just a petty comeback. Not just skipping the wedding or cutting off contact. No, this needed to be bigger. This needed to be the moment they realized what they'd lost. That family isn't a one-way street. That even the responsible one has a limit. I went home, tucked Owen into bed, and opened my laptop. And then I started writing the first part of my plan. Because if they wanted a show for Zach's big day, they were about to get one. But not the kind they expected. Not even close. I didn't hear from them for a while after the grocery store encounter. Not Mom, not Dad, not even Zach. It was like I'd suddenly become radioactive, too much trouble to deal with. And honestly, I welcomed the silence. But then, 2 weeks before the wedding, I got an envelope in the mail. Not a text, not an email, an actual envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, embossed with a gold crest I didn't recognize, probably something Emily's family paid extra for. Inside was an invitation, formal script, flourishes, the whole 9 yards. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Zachary Dawson and Emily Carroll, to be held at the Willowdale Country Estate. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was surreal. The invite looked like something pulled from a royal event, not the wedding of a guy who still owed me $300 from a car repair 3 years ago. Then I saw the RSVP card, and the line at the bottom. Regretfully, due to venue capacity limitations, children are not permitted at the ceremony or reception. I stared at it, blinking. No kids. No Owen. Not even allowed to come. There it was. The betrayal. The line. I wasn't just being sidelined anymore. My son, my kid, who was still healing from a fractured arm and barely a few weeks out of the ER, was being officially excluded from the biggest family event of the year. I felt cold. Numb. Not angry at first. Just shocked. Then that shock slowly curdled into something else. This wasn't about capacity. I knew the venue. Willowdale was enormous. My cousin had her wedding there 2 years ago, and there were plenty of kids running around then, including Zach's best friend's 3 toddlers. It was a complete lie. A dressed-up, gold-embossed lie. They didn't want Owen there. Not because of space. Not because of noise. But because he was my son. And I wasn't part of the image they wanted to present to Emily's family. This wasn't a wedding invite. It was a declaration. We don't want your life around ours. That night, I didn't sleep. I just kept pacing, back and forth across my apartment, the words on the card echoing like a bad chorus in my head. No children permitted. No Owen. No Owen. At one point, I found myself in his room, watching him sleep. His cast was still wrapped in the blue cover the nurse gave him, his little hand poking out like a question. He stirred once, muttered something about skating better next time, and settled back into a deeper sleep. And in that moment, something in me hardened. I was done asking for respect, done waiting for it. They'd made it clear where we stood. I wasn't just the black sheep anymore. I was the guy they were embarrassed of. The one who showed up to Thanksgiving in khakis while Zach wore a designer blazer. The one who brought store-bought cookies because I didn't have time to bake, while Emily brought a 3-tiered cake and got applauded like she was on a cooking show. I wasn't welcome. Not really. But they wanted my help. They wanted my lasagna. They wanted me to pitch in and buy gifts and play valet on wedding day. No, not anymore. I needed clarity, though. One last confirmation. Something I couldn't ignore, twist, or rationalize. So the next morning, I called Mom. She answered on the second ring. Hi, sweetie. Everything okay? I forced my voice to stay calm. Got the wedding invite. Thanks. Oh, good. Aren't they beautiful? Emily's mother helped pick the font. So classy. I let the silence stretch until she filled it. She always did. Is there a problem? She asked finally, her voice already sliding toward annoyance. I saw the note, I said. About no kids. A pause. Then, oh yes. We had to make a hard decision. Honey, the venue really is strict about that. Liability, you know? And space. There's plenty of space. Well, technically, yes, but we didn't want too many little ones running around during the reception. It's a black tie event, Miles. Very formal. Emily's family is traditional. I almost laughed again. So Owen's not invited because he might ruin the vibe? She sighed, like I was exhausting her. Please don't take it personally. It's not just Owen. It's all children. But Zach's friend Rob is bringing his kids. A beat of silence. They're in the wedding party. I stared at the floor. What? Flower girl and ring bearer. Rob's little ones. It's just different. No, it's not, I said, voice low. You're just pretending it is. Miles, let me ask you something. Did you ever intend for Owen to be there? She hesitated. Too long. I assumed you wouldn't want him to come, she said finally. After everything with the accident. It's a long event, and he's still healing. He's fine. And even if he wasn't, that should have been my call. Miles, don't make this about you. I'm not, I said sharply. That's the problem. It's never about me. Or Owen. It's always about Zach. His comfort. His preferences. His perfect little wedding. And the rest of us are just props. Her tone turned cold. This is a happy time. Don't ruin it. There it was. The shutdown. The gaslight. I hung up. And this time, I didn't regret it. That week, I started making a list. Not just mentally, I wrote it down. Every favor I'd done. Every time I'd stepped up. Every time Zach bailed on moving day, and I came with the truck. Every time Dad forgot to book a service appointment, and I called in favors with my mechanic. Every time I watched my own parents skip Owen's milestones. His kindergarten graduation, his birthday parties, his school plays. Because Zach had something come up. The imbalance wasn't subtle anymore. It was in ink. On paper. Measured. And it made something in my chest tighten. One night, I got a call from my aunt, my mom's sister, Aunt Brenda. She'd always been the one sane voice in the family. The one who remembered Owen's birthday. The one who once quietly pulled me aside after a Christmas dinner and whispered, "You're doing great. I see you." She called late. I was surprised. "Hey, Miles," she said, voice low. "Just wanted to check in. I heard about the invite." Of course she had. News traveled fast in this family. "I'm fine," I said. "Owen's fine." There was a pause. "Did you know Zach is using your logo for his wedding website?" My breath caught. "What?" "The one you designed for your old business. The interlocking M and D. It's all over his site. Different color, but same exact shape." I felt sick. I hadn't even realized he knew about that logo. I made it years ago, during my freelance branding days. He told people he designed it, Brenda added. That was it. That was the moment. The final twist of the knife. He stole my work. My design. Something I created. And he didn't even bother to change it beyond a new color palette. He just slapped it on his wedding site and bragged about it like it was his own. And no one called him out. Not even Mom or Dad. Of course not. That night, I stared at that list again. And I started writing a new one. Not of what I'd done, but of what I was about to do. Because this wasn't just about exclusion anymore. This was theft. This was erasure. This was a family that had spent years chiseling away at me until all that remained was someone useful, quiet, invisible. And they were about to learn what happened when the quiet one finally stood up. But first, I needed to be patient. Let them think I was still coming. Let them assign me tasks. Parking duty. Lasagna. Whatever. Let them ignore Owen. Let Zach brag about his logo. Let them get comfortable. Because they'd underestimated me for years. And the show was just getting started. The week leading up to Zach's wedding felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Eerily calm, suffocatingly quiet, but I knew the storm was coming. I could feel it building in my chest, one ignored slight and stifled breath at a time. Owen had started asking more questions. Not in a bitter way. Just curious, trying to make sense of things in his own 12-year-old way. Why doesn't Uncle Zach like me? Why don't we go to Grandma's house anymore? Am I going to the wedding with you? I didn't have good answers for any of them. I tried to keep my voice steady. I told him families are complicated. That some grown-ups forget what matters. That we didn't do anything wrong. But deep down, I was unraveling. Not in some dramatic, throw-the-plates kind of way. It was quieter than that. Like standing in a room and realizing you're the only one who ever shows up. The day of the wedding rehearsal came. I didn't go. I'd gotten 3 reminder texts from Mom that week asking me to please confirm you're bringing 2 trays of lasagna and sparkling cider. No mention of Owen. No. Hey, we're so excited to see you. Just logistics. I didn't reply. I'd stopped replying altogether by then. Let them wonder. Let them plan around a ghost. But I wasn't idle. In fact, behind the silence, I was planning more carefully than I ever had. I started by pulling up the wedding website. The logo Zach stole, the one I had designed for my old branding studio, was front and center. It stung in a way that caught me off guard. Not just the theft, but how lazily he did it. No effort to tweak it. No credit. Just pasted it there like he owned it. He even watermarked it on the RSVP cards. And my parents? Not a word. Not even a nod to where it came from. They stood by and let him take something I created and claim it as his own, as if that were just expected. That was rock bottom. Not the ER. Not the wedding snub. Not the fake, no children policy. This was the moment I realized I could never go back to who I was before. Because for the first time, I stopped caring if they ever approved of me. I stopped caring if they changed. They wouldn't. That was the truth. The kind of truth that takes years to finally sink in. They didn't see me. Not really. I was the guy who filled in the blanks. Who showed up when Zach bailed. Who brought the food. Who took the group photos. Who had it handled. I was never the one they celebrated. I was never the son they bragged about. I was the utility. And I was done. But that didn't mean I was going to disappear quietly. Not anymore. 2 days before the wedding, Dad called again. "Miles," he said, voice lighter than I expected. "We've been trying to finalize seating. Are you coming?" "Why?" I asked. He sounded thrown. "What do you mean, why? Why do you want me there?" "Miles." "No, really. Be honest. You banned my son. You ignored him when he was in the hospital. You let Zach steal from me. So what's left? You need someone to set up the tables?" He sighed. "Look, I know there's been tension, but Zach's wedding is not the time for this. It's supposed to be a celebration." "That's funny. It sure feels like a funeral." There was a long pause. Then, in a softer tone, he said, "Miles, don't make this bigger than it needs to be." But it was big. It had always been big. I just hadn't let myself see it. I ended the call by telling him I'd let them know. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already been working on something for weeks. Something small, subtle, not petty, but precise. Revenge, yes, but not loud, messy revenge. Surgical revenge. It started with a cease and desist. I had proof, timestamps, original files, drafts of that logo dating back 5 years. I still had the invoice from when I registered it with my LLC, back when I thought I was going to launch my own agency. A friend of mine, Danielle, was a freelance intellectual property attorney. We'd worked on a project once where a client tried to stiff us both. She was smart, ruthless in the right way, and owed me a favor. I sent her everything. The files, screenshots, their wedding site URL. Within 2 days, she drafted a formal letter addressed to Zachary Dawson and Emily Carroll, requesting immediate removal of all design elements attributed to me, along with a notice that any use of my registered mark constituted a copyright violation. I didn't send it yet. No, this wasn't the moment. This wasn't the stage. I wanted it to land where it mattered, where it would have an audience, at the wedding. But before that, I needed something else, something quieter, something personal. Closure. I wrote a letter. Not the kind you send. The kind you write just to see your own truth on paper. "Dear Mom and Dad, I used to think the problem was me. That maybe I was too sensitive, too distant. That maybe if I was more like Zach, louder, flashier, easier, you'd see me the way you see him. But I realize now, it was never about who I was. It was about who you decided I was. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your praise. I've raised my son alone for 12 years. I've missed sleep, meals, vacations, and relationships just to keep his world steady. And I've done it without complaint, without expectation. But I'm done asking for space at a table I helped build. You want a show for Zach's wedding? I'll give you one. Sincerely, the son who finally stopped trying. I didn't send that one either. But it sat there on my desk, glaring back at me. A reminder of what I was walking away from, and what I was walking toward. The night before the wedding, Owen and I made pizza together. He wore his favorite hoodie, gray, with a faded cartoon dinosaur, and asked if we were doing something special the next day. I hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, buddy, I think we are." He grinned and kept layering cheese on the pizza like it was his job. I didn't explain the plan. He didn't need to know. Not the details. All he needed to know was that I was choosing him, that I'd always choose him. The next morning, I got dressed in a suit. Not because I was going to the wedding, but because I needed to look sharp for what came next. I packed up a few things: Danielle's cease and desist letter, a USB with the original logo files, a printed list of my invoices, and one more thing. A framed photo of Owen from the hospital. Pale, bruised, but smiling. With my hand on his. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it because they needed to see what they'd ignored. What they'd thrown away for the sake of appearances. I slid everything into a leather folio, zipped it up, and checked my watch. The wedding ceremony started in 3 hours, and I was going to be ready. But I wasn't going there as a guest. I was going there as something else entirely. And when the music stopped and the cake was cut, they'd remember me. Not the way they remembered Zach, but in a way they'd never forget. I didn't show up at the country estate in time for the ceremony. I wasn't interested in watching Zach sob through his vows, pretending to be a grown man while wearing a suit his fiancé's family probably paid for. I wasn't there to watch my mom dab her eyes with a monogrammed napkin or hear Dad chuckle loudly at some private joke with the in-laws to show he was cool for his age. I was there for the reception, when all the flash and glitter would be on full display, when cameras would be rolling, glasses would be clinking, and everyone would be at their most smug and self-satisfied. That's when the mask always slips, when people think they've won. The Willowdale Country Estate was a sprawling vineyard/event space about an hour outside the city. Gorgeous in that sterile, curated way, all manicured hedges, cobblestone paths, and faux rustic signs. There was valet parking, a cocktail garden, and at least 4 photo booths, judging by the setup I saw while walking past. I showed up alone. Suit crisp, shoes polished, folio in hand. The second I stepped onto the reception patio, I could feel the tension. Not from strangers, no, from them. Mom spotted me first. Her face twitched as she approached, plastering on a strained smile that looked like it physically hurt her cheeks. "Miles, you made it." Her voice was a mix of surprise and relief, like someone who expected the fire alarm to go off, but was still hoping it wouldn't. "I did," I said, handing her a gift bag with the framed photo of Owen in the hospital. "Thought I'd drop this off." She took it, confused. "What is it?" "Something I thought Zach and Emily should have. Family memento." Her smile faltered. "Is Owen with you?" I looked around, as if checking for him. "No kids allowed, remember?" She flinched. "Just a little." Right. "Well, the venue was." "I know. You said that." She stood there for a moment, clutching the bag, searching for words. Then Zach appeared behind her, drink in hand, bow tie loosened like he was the king of his own after-party. Well, look who showed," he said with a smirk. "Thought you were boycotting the family. Just wanted to make sure you got my gift," I said evenly. He gave me a side eye and laughed. "Don't tell me it's another pair of socks." I smiled. "Something like that." I could tell he wasn't threatened. Not even slightly. Because Zach never believed there were consequences. Not for him. Not for me. I was just the older brother who carried his bags and watched his dog when he went on vacation. He didn't know I wasn't that guy anymore. The reception moved indoors. A ballroom with hanging chandeliers, a string quartet, and long banquet tables lined with glassware and enough floral arrangements to make you sneeze just by looking at them. I didn't sit at the family table. They'd assigned me to one in the back, near the door to the kitchen, next to 2 cousins I hadn't seen in 10 years and a guy from Emily's side who spent 20 minutes loudly explaining cryptocurrency to his girlfriend. I didn't eat, didn't drink, just sat quietly, watching the room. Then came the speeches. Emily's dad went first. Predictable, loving, saccharine, a touch overlong. Then Mom. She told some story about Zach saving a kitten once. I couldn't tell if it was real or rebranded from a Disney movie. Then Zach took the mic. He started with the usual cliches. "I wouldn't be who I am without my family. Marriage is a journey. Emily makes me a better man." I almost tuned it out. Until he got to the logo. "And I want to thank everyone who helped make this day happen," he said, raising his glass. "Especially my buddy Chris, who designed the wedding website and that sick logo we've been using on everything. Man, you nailed it." The crowd clapped. I didn't. Because there it was. My design. My work. Being handed off as a party favor. Like I was nothing. Like I'd never existed. That was my cue. I stood up quietly, walked out of the ballroom, and found the event coordinator near the catering setup. A well-dressed woman with a headset and a clipboard, clearly running on stress and espresso. "Hi," I said, flashing a polite smile. "I need to speak with the DJ before the slideshow starts. I have something the groom forgot to include." She blinked. I think we already have the playlist." I handed her the USB. "It's preloaded. No changes needed. Just cue it after the best man speech. Trust me, it'll mean a lot." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll make sure he gets it." I thanked her, walked back into the ballroom, and waited. 10 minutes later, The best man wrapped up his speech with a joke about Zach's party years and how Emily domesticated the beast. Laughter all around. Glasses clinking. Then the lights dimmed slightly, and the projector flickered to life. Before we bring the couple out for their first dance, the DJ announced, "We've got a special video message from someone who couldn't be here." The screen lit up. First slide. A letter to the groom and bride, from someone who used to be family. The room fell silent. Second slide. A photo of Owen in the hospital bed, smiling with his cast. Gasps. Then came a string of side-by-side comparisons. My original logo sketches. The file date stamps. The logo Zach used. The registration certificate. Then one final message on screen. This design was stolen. No credit was given. No family visited. But some truths demand an audience. Congratulations, Zach. And goodbye. The lights snapped back on. And I was already gone. I didn't wait to see their faces. I didn't need to. I'd said everything I needed to say. I didn't even drive straight home. I stopped at a lookout point outside the city, sat on the hood of my car, and stared out across the hills. The air felt different, like breathing in for the first time after years underwater. My phone buzzed. Voicemail from Mom. Missed call from Dad. 3 texts from Zach. All caps. All rage. I didn't open any of them, because I was finally done giving people access to me just because we shared DNA. That was the beginning. The real beginning. It's been 4 months since the wedding. And life. It's better than I ever expected. I didn't think cutting off my family would feel freeing. I thought it would feel like amputation. But it didn't. It felt like walking out of a room where someone had been slowly poisoning the air. I started focusing on my design business again. Relaunched my brand. Reclaimed my logo. Built a new site. Told my story. About the theft. About the erasure. About how creatives deserve credit, even from their own family. The post went viral. Clients started flooding in. Not huge corporate gigs, but passionate startups, authors, musicians, people who respected the craft, people who saw me. I made more money in those 3 months than I had in the entire year before. Owen and I moved into a better place. Nothing huge, just a 2-bedroom with a balcony and better lighting. I finally bought him the gaming laptop he'd been saving up for. We spent a weekend building IKEA furniture and eating Chinese food straight from the cartons. He still asks about the family sometimes, but less often now. And when he does, I don't lie. They didn't treat us right, I say. And sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who don't clap when you win. He nods. Quietly. Thoughtfully. And then he goes back to drawing or gaming or trying to teach me some ridiculous Fortnite dance. We're good. Really good. Better than I thought we'd ever be. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not chasing a seat at anyone's table. I'm building my own. The first few weeks after the wedding felt like emerging from a fog. I'd spent so many years gaslighting myself, trying to believe I was the problem. Too serious, too distant, too unwilling to just let things go. But now, after reclaiming my self-respect and severing ties with people who refused to acknowledge my worth or my son's humanity, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt clean, uncluttered, peaceful. I got a lot of mixed messages in the aftermath. Mom tried calling twice, left a voicemail that was more damage control than apology. "We just wanted things to be special for Zach," she said. "It wasn't personal. Can we please just move forward as a family?" I didn't respond. Dad emailed me a week later with the subject line, "This has gone too far." The body was short. Just a few lines accusing me of embarrassing the family, warning me to stop with the drama, and, my personal favorite, reminding me that Zach has a reputation to protect now that he's married into a respected family. That line got under my skin more than I expected, because it confirmed what I'd always suspected. I was never the son they believed in. I was the wild card, the liability, the one who could be tolerated, so long as I stayed quiet and useful. But I wasn't quiet anymore, and I was done being useful to people who never lifted a finger for me. Still, I didn't lash out. Not right away. Because while the fallout from the wedding made headlines in our little family circle, I had bigger things on my mind. Business was booming. After the slideshow stunt, which, by the way, went mildly viral after someone at the wedding uploaded a video of it to TikTok with the caption, "Groom's brother airs the family's dirty laundry in 4K. I started getting DMs, lots of them. Some were from other designers who had been through similar things, clients ghosting them, relatives stealing their work, corporations refusing to pay. But others were from small business owners who said things like, "I want to work with someone who values their craft like you do," or "Your designs are clean and honest, just like your story." Within a month, I'd picked up 7 new clients. By the 3rd month, I was booked through the end of the year. I wasn't making Zuckerberg money, but I was finally earning enough to breathe, really breathe, for the first time in years. I upgraded some of my equipment, got Owen a new bike for his birthday, took 2 full weekends off, no work at all, just him and me in a cabin by the lake. And then something unexpected happened. I got an email from someone named Rachel Liu, head of brand development at a fast-growing indie publishing house in Portland. She'd seen the viral post, clicked through to my portfolio, and liked what she saw. They were launching a new author imprint and needed a creative director to oversee branding, cover design, and digital presence. She asked if I'd be interested in a 6-month contract. It was more money than I'd made in 2 years. I didn't hesitate. The publishing job gave me access to things I hadn't had before, tools, networks, and connections I never knew I'd need. And more importantly, data. That might not sound exciting to most people, but when you've been belittled and ignored your entire life, seeing hard numbers, real analytics, measurable growth, actual metrics, proves what you always suspected but could never say out loud. You were never the problem. I ran a case study on my rebranded design site. Traffic increased by 470% in 8 weeks. Click-through rates on contact forms tripled. My average client spend went up by 200%. I even had a nonprofit reach out and offer me a recurring retainer to redesign all their public campaigns. And all of that came from finally saying, enough. Owen noticed the change, too. Not just in the bigger apartment or the newer car, but in me. "You smile more now," he told me one night while we were building Lego towers on the living room rug. "Do I?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "And you don't look tired all the time." I ruffled his hair, fighting the lump in my throat. Because the truth was, I had been tired. Not just from work, but from trying to win a game that was always rigged. From showing up for people who wouldn't cross the street for me. That weight was gone now. And that left me with something I hadn't had in years, clarity, and space to start thinking more strategically. Because there was still one loose thread in the story. Zach. I hadn't spoken to him since the wedding, but I had heard about him, indirectly. One of the cousins I sat next to during the reception messaged me a few weeks later. "Dude, that slideshow? Iconic." But guess what? Zach's business pitch to Emily's family flopped. Apparently, he was trying to get her dad to invest in some tech startup idea, but the slideshow made him look shady, and now they're distancing themselves. I didn't respond, but I filed the info away. A month later, a former client of mine, someone I'd done web work for years ago, reached out and asked, "Is your brother's company legit? He's using your logo on a deck he sent me." That got my attention. I asked him to forward the pitch deck. He did, and there it was. A glossier version of the same logo. My logo. Still stolen. Still uncredited. Only now it was being used to push some vague, fintech lifestyle startup Zach had apparently cooked up, complete with AI buzzwords and fake testimonials. I stared at the deck for 20 minutes, stunned. Not just because he was still using my work, but because he was actively monetizing it, passing it off as a legitimate brand identity. A business. A pitch to real investors. I called Danielle again, the IP lawyer who had helped me draft the original cease and desist. I sent her the updated files, screenshots, timestamps. "This is blatant," she said. "You want to take legal action?" I hesitated. A year ago, I would have said no. I would have felt guilty, afraid, ashamed for even thinking about it. But now, I'd earned my peace. I'd fought my way back from the edge. I had clients, contracts, a future, and I had power. So yeah, I wanted justice. But not just a lawsuit. I wanted to own the space Zach thought he ruled. So I started researching. And I found something interesting. Turns out Zach had filed a business license in our state for his startup, but hadn't trademarked the name. I checked the domain registry. The .com was already taken, but the .org, .app, and .co versions? Available. So I bought them. All of them. Then I trademarked the name. Legally. Fully. Publicly. I updated my business portfolio to include brand rescue services, reclaiming stolen or misused designs. I made a quiet blog post about the Zach situation without naming names, showing how important it is to protect your intellectual property even from unexpected sources. It blew up. Design Twitter had a field day. More clients came in. And best of all, Zach didn't even know yet. I was playing the long game now. Strategically, carefully. And when the moment came to pull the pin, it would be loud and permanent. But not yet. First, I had to get everything lined up. The domain redirects, the trademark certificate, the client testimonials, and one final thing, proof that Zach had profited, even a little, off the brand he stole. Because once I had that, it wasn't just a copyright issue. It was fraud. And I was going to make sure he paid for every smug little smirk, every stolen design, every time he called Owen your kid instead of his nephew. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about balance. The kind you measure in invoices, signatures, and court dates. And when it came due, Zach was going to realize something very important. He didn't just lose a brother. He created an adversary. It took almost 2 months of preparation before I finally decided it was time. Not out of impulse or anger. Those days were behind me, but because everything was now in place. Every receipt, every timestamp, every copy of every file that proved what Zach had done. For once, I wasn't walking into a family fight fueled by emotion. I was walking into a checkmate I'd built, piece by piece, in silence. The best revenge, I'd come to learn, wasn't loud. It was quiet, legal, permanent. And it started with a phone call I didn't expect. "Hey, Miles," came a voice I hadn't heard in almost half a year. It was Aunt Brenda. Calm, level-headed Brenda, the only relative who ever saw through the chaos. "Just thought you should know, your brother's well, he's in trouble." I leaned back in my chair. "What kind of trouble?" "He's been going around trying to get investors for that tech company he keeps talking about, Momentum Innovations or something, but apparently someone reported his website for trademark infringement. His domain's been taken down, and he's freaking out." "Trademark infringement?" I repeated, feigning confusion. "Huh, wonder how that happened." She sighed, long and knowing. "Miles, you didn't." "I did everything legally," I said, my tone calm but firm. "And honestly, Brenda, for once, I'm not sorry." She didn't scold me. She didn't even sound surprised. "Good," she said. "Someone had to teach that boy consequences." Zach's meltdown came fast and loud. He didn't call me directly, of course. He sent an email titled, "You need to fix this." Not please. Not can we talk. Just pure entitlement, like I was still his unpaid tech guy. Apparently, after I trademarked the name and secured all domain variations, I'd set up a simple redirect. Anyone who typed in his company's name got sent to my portfolio site, where a banner read, "Protect your work." Because not everyone respects creative ownership. Underneath was a small link. Learn how to safeguard your intellectual property. I didn't mention Zach. I didn't need to. The implication was enough. His investors had started asking questions. A few of them ran basic background checks, and when they found my trademark registration attached to the company name he was pitching under, the funding dried up instantly. The website went dark. His pitch deck looked fraudulent. And the cherry on top? The platform he used to host his demo app banned his account for potential IP violations. Within a week, his company had imploded. He tried calling Dad next. Then Mom. Both of them called me in a panic. "Miles, can't you just let this go?" Mom pleaded. "He's your brother. Let it go." I asked softly. "He stole from me. He erased me. You all helped him do it." Dad cut in. "It's family business, son. Family handles things privately." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what I tried to do for 12 years. You ignored it. Now it's public, and suddenly it matters." They had no response. And for once, I didn't fill the silence for them. The next phase was unintentional but poetic. One of the contacts from the publishing house, Rachel Liu, called me about a month later. "We're expanding," she said. "And I've been thinking, have you ever considered managing a small creative team?" I froze. "You mean like full-time?" "Not in-house. Contract to hire," she explained. "You'd oversee branding for our new digital imprint, mentor junior designers, build a consistent visual identity across authors. It's a leadership role, and honestly, you've got the temperament for it. You're calm under fire." Calm under fire. If she only knew. I accepted. Within weeks, I had a small team of 4, 2 designers, a photographer, and a social media coordinator. We worked remotely, scheduled creative sessions twice a week, and hit every milestone early. I felt a kind of energy I hadn't known in years. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was building something that was mine. And I made sure to bring Owen into the picture, too. He'd come into my office sometimes after school, sit beside me, and watch while I edited mock-ups or fine-tuned cover concepts. He'd started sketching logos himself, doodles of dragons, spaceships, and sometimes a skateboard company he called Solar Decks. When I told him one day, "You know, you could actually learn design for real," his eyes lit up. "You mean like you?" "Better," I said with a grin. "Way better." Then, out of nowhere, Zach showed up at my apartment. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was on the balcony watering the small collection of succulents Owen insisted we adopt. I heard a knock, turned around, and there he was, looking nothing like the confident, smirking brother I remembered. His hair was unkempt, his shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked. I didn't answer at first, just stepped aside and gestured him in. He stood awkwardly by the door, glancing around at the new furniture, the framed prints on the wall. His gaze lingered on a photo of me and Owen at the lake. "You're doing good," he said finally. "I am." He swallowed. "I messed up." I didn't respond. He kept going. "After the wedding thing, Emily's family stopped trusting me. Her dad pulled out of the investment. Then I tried to relaunch the brand under a new name, but that got flagged too. He hesitated. "I didn't know you'd actually trademarked it." "You mean you didn't think I could?" I corrected. "Because I was the boring brother. The one who handled things quietly." He looked down. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, man. I just thought it didn't matter." I almost laughed. "Didn't matter? You used my design, my name, my reputation, and when I called you out, you doubled down." He sighed. "I know. I was stupid. I lost everything." "You didn't lose everything," I said calmly. "You lost what wasn't yours." We stood there in silence for a while. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I need help, Miles. I've got debts now. Emily left. I'm trying to get back on my feet." I thought maybe. I waited. "Maybe what?" "Maybe you could put in a word for me at your company. You've got connections, right? Just something small. Freelance. I can do social media or sales or whatever." It was almost funny how quickly the roles had flipped. For years, I'd been the one needing help, asking for support, only to be told everyone was too busy. And now here was Zach, standing in my doorway, shoulders slumped, voice trembling, asking me to throw him a lifeline. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I thought of Owen, lying in that hospital bed, of the $1 I'd sent with the note, "Get him socks," of the way Mom's voice turned cold when I dared to call out the unfairness, and of how Zach laughed in the grocery store aisle when I mentioned the accident. The pity evaporated. "Zach," I said quietly, "you taught me a valuable lesson." He frowned. "What?" "That family doesn't mean letting people use you." He didn't say anything. "I'm not your enemy," I added, "but I'm not your safety net either." His eyes glistened. "So that's it." "That's it," I said. "You wanted to build a business? Build one from scratch. Like I did, without stealing someone else's foundation." He turned to leave, stopped at the door, and said, "Mom and Dad won't forgive you for this." I smiled faintly. "Then I guess they can add it to the list." He left without another word. A week later, I got a call from Rachel again. "We're opening a new design residency," she said. "We'd like you to lead it." It was an educational initiative for young artists, free workshops, paid mentorships, and internship opportunities. The kind of program I would have killed for when I was starting out. I said yes without hesitation. Over the next few months, I helped design a full curriculum. I taught branding ethics, design law, and portfolio building. I even created a module called Credit Matters, the cost of creative theft. It became the most popular session in the program. And when we held our first live-streamed event, I ended the talk with one simple line. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destroying someone else's world. It's about building yours so high they can't reach it. The chat exploded with applause emojis and heart reactions. Somewhere out there, I knew Zach would probably see that clip. And that was fine, because I wasn't doing it for him anymore. I was doing it for Owen. For every overlooked, underestimated person who kept giving until they had nothing left. For me. And the sweetest part? I didn't even have to raise my voice. Zach didn't implode right away. At first, he did what he always did when life turned against him. He pivoted, claimed the trademark situation was a misunderstanding, told anyone who'd listen that I was bitter and jealous. He even tried to paint me as unstable, spreading whispers through the family grapevine that I'd been weird ever since the hospital thing and never really recovered after the divorce. But the thing about lies? They're slippery, Hard to hold on to once people start checking facts. And thanks to the business community I'd built over the past year, those facts weren't buried anymore. They were public, archived, and, most importantly, shared. The domains I purchased redirected to a sleek microsite that told the full story of the stolen design, complete with side-by-side visuals, timelines, and screenshots of Zach's fake investor pitch using my logo. It wasn't mean-spirited. It was just facts. Clean, cold, documented, and extremely hard to argue with. Zach's reputation, already on shaky ground after the wedding stunt, began to unravel. Former partners distanced themselves. A few of his friends stopped responding to his messages. Emily's family, from what I heard, cut him off completely once they realized how badly he had tried to rope their name into his con. But the final blow came when he tried to start a new venture, something unrelated to design or tech. A dropshipping side hustle called Peakflare Company. He launched an Instagram, registered a Shopify page, even used AI-generated product mock-ups to make it look bigger than it was. And then, out of habit, or maybe desperation, he reused the same branding elements he stole from me a year ago. Same icon, same tagline, just reworded. Same color scheme. He must have figured I wouldn't notice. Or maybe he thought enough time had passed. He was wrong. I filed a takedown request through Shopify, Instagram, and his domain registrar. This time, armed with a legal trademark and a history of documented IP abuse, the takedowns were swift. His entire online presence disappeared in 48 hours. He tried messaging me again after that. Just one line. You've made your point. Now stop. I didn't reply. Not because I hadn't heard him, but because I had. He was done, and I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. Mom called again a few weeks later. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was quieter this time. Not angry. Not frantic. Just tired. I miss you. I miss Owen. I know I've made mistakes. Your father and I, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just didn't know how to handle everything. We thought you were strong. You always were. Maybe we leaned on you too much. She paused. Zach's in a rough place. He's not himself. He's talking about leaving the state. Says there's nothing here for him. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm losing both my sons. Another pause. Please call me. Or at least, let us see Owen. He shouldn't have to be caught in all this. Click. I sat there for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time, she didn't. That voicemail didn't move me. Not the way it might have a year ago. It sounded like someone trying to reopen a door they'd spent decades ignoring until it finally rusted shut. But I did play the message for Owen. He listened quietly, swinging his legs off the edge of the couch. His game paused on the screen. Do you want to see them? I asked gently. He shook his head. Not really. I didn't push. Just ruffled his hair and said, okay. That was the last time I played that voicemail. I didn't delete it, but I never listened to it again. 6 months passed. The new mentorship program I ran had expanded to include 2 satellite cities. My team had grown. I was now managing a dozen creatives, all remote, all thriving. I was invited to speak at a national design conference, my first keynote. Owen came with me. He sat in the front row while I told the story, not just about branding, not just about theft, but about value. The kind people don't always see. The kind that doesn't scream or demand attention. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, I told the crowd, people would notice. That they'd say thank you. That they'd treat me fairly. But the truth is, some people only see you as far as they can use you. A murmur swept through the crowd. Heads nodded. But here's the thing. I continued. You don't need permission to reclaim your story. You don't need an apology to walk away. And you don't need validation from people who only show up when there's something to take. I looked down at Owen. He smiled. And I smiled back. Because this wasn't just my revenge story anymore. It was his origin story. He was growing up in a home that honored boundaries, respected effort, and valued authenticity. He'd seen what entitlement looked like, and what quiet strength could do to it. I'd made sure of that. I did hear from Zach one last time. Almost a year to the day after the wedding. A handwritten letter. No return address. Just a single page, folded neatly. Miles, I don't know if this will even reach you. I've been doing some thinking. A lot of thinking. I was wrong. About everything. About the wedding. The brand. Owen. You. I told myself I was the victim, but I wasn't. I was just a guy who thought he could take, and take without paying the bill. You sent the bill. I got it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve a second chance. but I wanted you to know that you were right. About all of it. Zach. There was no PS. No contact info. Just that. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, but because my life wasn't about him anymore. He wasn't the center of my story. I was. And I wasn't done writing it. The last scene I'll give you is this. Owen and I were walking through a local art fair. He'd just saved up enough money to buy a digital sketch tablet and was showing me designs he'd been working on, logos for his imaginary skateboard company, his YouTube banner, even a draft of a comic he wanted to write. At one booth, a woman noticed my name on my card and said, "Wait, you're that Miles Dawson?" I nodded a little sheepishly. "Depends which story you've heard." She grinned. "The one where the quiet brother finally got loud in the best possible way." I laughed. "That's me." Owen looked up at me. "You were kind of famous," he whispered. "Nah," I said. "Just loud enough that people finally started listening." And then I put my arm around his shoulder. We kept walking. The sun was high. The path was clear. And for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't chasing anyone. I was already home.